Ryuji meticulously organizes his kitchen studio while preparing for a major recording session. He delivers a signature smile while raising a tall highball to the camera. Digital records confirm his massive influence with over 10 million followers across platforms. A collection of best-selling recipe books showcases his undeniable impact on home cooking. The production crew settles around a low table to celebrate their hard day's work. Ryuji knocks back his drink with immense gusto as the party gets underway. He slams the glass down and cheers for the perfection of a cold highball. Precision is key as he shakes a layer of salt onto the side of his hand. He licks the seasoning while explaining his professional approach to drinking to his friend. His companion looks on with a quiet, knowing smirk at the chef's eccentric behavior. Conversation turns toward the chef's impressive rise from the bottom to the top. Visions of his past life as a shut-in gamer and dishwasher cross his mind. Ryuji enjoys a quiet meal while a baseball game concludes on the nearby television. He jokingly brags about his success with an exaggeratedly long Pinocchio-style nose. The crew members lean in to ask what his next major objective will be. He falls into a pensive silence while gazing into his half-empty drink. The ice clinks against the glass as he searches for a new spark of inspiration. An anime broadcast on the screen catches his eye and triggers a wild idea. He announces his intention to master cooking using ingredients from a fantasy world. The whole group erupts into joyous laughter over his strange and ambitious new goal. Ryuji maintains a confident smirk while savoring the final moments of the evening party. He expresses his gratitude to his dedicated crew while taking another long sip. A friend suddenly collapses from exhaustion while Ryuji looks on with a sweat drop. The entire production team eventually falls into a deep sleep around the cluttered table. A sudden magical light begins to emanate from a leftover dish in the room. The glow intensifies as a strange runic symbol manifests on the surface of the food. Powerful energy surges from the plate and illuminates the dark living room. The intensity peaks in a blinding flash that consumes everything in its path. Ryuji tumbles through a swirling dimensional tunnel surrounded by mysterious glowing glyphs. He arrives in a vibrant forest where fantasy creatures observe his sudden appearance. Two local guards dressed in full armor peer through the bushes with deep suspicion. Ryuji remains passed out on the forest floor while still clutching his highball and salt. One of the soldiers leans in closer to inspect a strange object in the chef's hand. His eyes focus on the small glass bottle filled with refined white powder. The soldier's face contorts in pure shock at the sight of such a rare treasure. In the distance, a massive stone castle stands tall against the bright afternoon sky. Inside the walls, Lord Joseph shouts commands to his staff during a hectic banquet preparation. A young maid named Tina carries a heavy tray while servants rush through the halls. She pauses for a brief moment to admire the delicious aroma of freshly baked goods. Tina finds herself drooling uncontrollably while gazing at the magnificent feast laid before her. Lord Joseph scolds Tina for staring at the banquet food with such longing eyes. The maid bows her head in apology while being lectured about her lowly status. Armed guards suddenly burst into the dining hall to report a strange discovery. Ryuji stumbles in while draped over a guard's shoulder and greeting the room drunkenly. A stunned silence falls over Lord Joseph and Tina as they witness the spectacle. The bewildered staff watches Ryuji take a seat at the center of the table. Lord Joseph nervously checks on the man, who seems completely intoxicated and disoriented. Ryuji jolts awake with a start and frantically questions his current location. He points a finger at the confused Lord while realizing he might be in another world. His attention shifts to the massive array of fantasy dishes spread across the table. Ryuji asks for permission to sample the feast while pointing at a specific dish. Lord Joseph proudly claims the meal was prepared with the utmost care and expertise. Eager to try the local cuisine, Ryuji prepares to take a massive bite. He clamps his teeth down on a piece of meat and begins to taste it. The chef immediately spits out the food in a fit of pure disappointment. Ryuji loudly complains about the lack of flavor while the Lord offers an apology. He further insults the dish for being dry and severely lacking in basic seasoning. Tina stands frozen in frustration as her hard work is trashed by the stranger. Ryuji confidently produces his bottle of salt to teach them about proper seasoning. The entire staff recoils in absolute horror as the mysterious white powder is revealed. Ryuji looks confused while holding his salt shaker as a memory of a chef scolding him surfaces. Tina reacts with a look of pure astonishment at the guest's casual display of wealth. The mysterious white seasoning pours out from the glass bottle onto the feast. Lord Joseph laughs with delight while Ryuji continues to season his meal. An armored guard enters the banquet hall and urgently calls out to the master of the house. The guard whispers the shocking news that the real Count Floria is arriving tomorrow instead. Ryuji points to himself with a smug grin as the realization of his true identity begins to dawn. Lord Joseph seethes with anger as he realizes he has been entertaining a total fraud. The furious lord stands and points a finger at the seated man, branding him a salt thief. Ryuji snaps and aggressively grabs the top of the short lord's head in retaliation. He holds a struggling man aloft while shouting about the unfairness of the situation. Ryuji keeps a firm grip on the lord's hair while identifying himself as a genius cooking researcher. The hairpiece suddenly slides completely off, leaving Ryuji holding a wig in his hand. A collective gasp of horror ripples through the room as everyone witnesses the lord's bald head. Ryuji hurriedly tries to shove the wig back onto the embarrassed noble's scalp. He offers a weak apology while patting the hairpiece into place on the shivering man. The young researcher stares in stunned silence at the consequences of his impulsive action. Lord Joseph shakes with uncontrollable fury as he is humiliated in front of his entire staff. He screams a command for the guards to throw the intruder into the darkest dungeon. The heavy gates of the castle prison loom over the damp and empty cells below. A small, winged pig creature trots along the dark floor of the dungeon. Ryuji sits dejectedly behind iron bars while the strange animal clings to the cage. The prisoner sighs and mutters to the creature as he settles into his uncomfortable new surroundings. Ryuji raises a finger and whispers a command to open his status window. A bright flash of magical energy erupts in front of him, manifesting as a glowing interface. He stares in disbelief at the floating screen confirming his name and his unique cooking researcher skills. Tina the maid stands guard outside the cell, looking concerned as Ryuji interacts with the invisible display. She recalls the moment Lord Joseph angrily ordered her to watch the prisoner all night long. A close-up reveals Tina's weary expression as she faces the reality of her long shift. Ryuji suddenly leans forward with a terrifying face, making Tina scream at the top of her lungs. The maid shakes her fist and yells back at him for trying to scare her so cruelly. She indignantly announces her name as Tina and demands he stop calling her a generic maid. Ryuji casually chugs a drink from his mug before introducing himself to his guard. Tina looks down at the cell and remarks on how unusual his foreign-sounding name is. The researcher wipes his mouth and questions why everyone reacted so strongly to his simple seasonings. Tina explains the immense value of salt, while shimmering bowls of rare spices appear in her imagination. She exclaims that such luxuries are reserved only for royalty and nobles, while commoners face strict rations. The frustrated maid rants about how the common folk never get to taste the food he insulted. A loud growl suddenly echoes from Tina's stomach as she stands frozen in front of the cell. Ryuji asks if she is hungry, causing the embarrassed maid to scream at him to mind his own business. Ryuji flashes a confident smirk, sensing an opportunity to show off his world-class culinary expertise. Turning toward the cell bars, he boldly announces that his pride won't allow a lady to go hungry. Tina stands paralyzed in absolute shock as her stomach continues to betray her presence with a growl. She sighs and dismisses his claims, firmly believing it is impossible to cook within a dark dungeon. Ignoring her doubts, Ryuji extends his palm and activates his unique skill kitchen ability with a shout. A radiant burst of magical energy suddenly floods the cramped cell and pushes back the surrounding shadows. A sleek modern kitchen manifests instantly within the stone walls, leaving the maid staring in wide-eyed wonder. Ryuji lets out a triumphant laugh as he surveys the professional workspace that has appeared before him. The room is filled with mysterious technological wonders like a rice cooker and a microwave oven. He notes the presence of familiar tools, including his favorite omelet pan and a sturdy highball mug. Tina cries out in pain when the large white object suddenly bites her for getting too close. She stares at her hand in shock and asks what this aggressive monster is supposed to be. The sentient refrigerator sticks its tongue out and mocks her for not recognizing a simple cooling appliance. Ryuji opens the unit and marvels at the drawers overflowing with fresh meats and crisp garden vegetables. He scans the shelves for his favorite beverage, but initially finds nothing but juice and condiments. The sentient cooling unit reacts by spitting a cold bottle of liquor directly into his waiting hand. While Ryuji cheers for his helpful new companion, Tina watches the supernatural display with mounting disbelief. His attention turns to the spice rack where jars of salt, sugar, and pepper sit in abundance. Tina gasps at the sight of such rare luxuries while Ryuji reaches for a professional denim apron. The researcher ties his apron tight and brandishes a sharp knife to begin his first otherworldly meal. Ryuji swirls the pan with expert precision to thicken the flavorful sauce. The chef presents a perfectly glazed chicken steak as his inaugural masterpiece. Preparation begins by thoroughly seasoning the chicken breast with salt and garlic. After searing the meat until golden brown, he wraps it in foil. He finishes the dish by melting butter and lemon juice into the pan. Tina and her small companion gaze at the shimmering meal with hungry eyes. She leans in close to savor the heavenly aroma wafting from the plate. The maid and her pet waste no time cutting into the tender meat. Tina takes her first bite as the rich flavors explode across her tongue. Her eyes squeeze shut in pure bliss as the incredible taste overwhelms her. Ryuji laughs triumphantly while Tina sheds tears of joy over the delicious food. He attempts to explain his culinary technique, but she is too busy eating. A look of deep sorrow crosses her face when she discovers the plate. She turns a piercing, expectant gaze toward the chef to signal her desire. Tina strikes a charming pose and begs for a second helping of food. Ryuji accepts the challenge with a grin, promising to feed her until full. The kitchen becomes a blur of motion as he produces plate after plate. Tina eventually leans back against a mountain of empty dishes with a sigh. She looks up at Ryuji and admits she has never tasted anything better. The master researcher finishes the session by taking a long gulp of highball. Tina tilts her head in curiosity, asking who the chef usually cooks for. Ryuji remains silent, looking down at the ice cubes melting in his glass. A vision of a quiet family meal with his mother flashes through his mind. Tina listens intently and offers a sympathetic smile to her new friend. She produces a small teardrop-shaped charm engraved with a winged crest. Looking away shyly, she mentions that today marks the anniversary of her birth. She reminisces about her mother serving a warm bowl of soup long ago. Her mother's gentle face appears as she explains the importance of feast days. Tina gazes upward, lost in the bittersweet nostalgia of her difficult upbringing. She reveals that her greatest childhood wish was to eat until satisfied. Her little companion lets out a burp while resting its overstuffed belly. Tina beams with happiness, thanking Ryuji for providing the perfect birthday gift. The scene shifts to Tina working hard to scrub the palace floors. She grumbles about the impossible task of cleaning while guarding the cells. Lowering her voice, she asks if the fake count's sentence is decided. The guards confirm that the prisoner's execution is scheduled for the following day. Tina reacts with visible shock as she overhears the news of the execution. Her hand trembles and clenches into a tight, frustrated fist. She looks ahead with a hardened glare and a new sense of purpose. A solitary candle flickers against the stone wall as the night settles in. Tina sprints through the dark stone corridors of the palace dungeon. Reaching the iron bars, she frantically calls out for Ryuji to wake up and escape. Ryuji remains deeply asleep on the cold floor with an empty glass nearby. Deciding to take action, she pulls a heavy ring of stolen keys from her pocket. A sudden voice behind her causes her to freeze mid-motion at the cell door. Lord Joseph and his guards emerge from the darkness to catch her in the act. He mockingly asks if she truly intends to let the insolent prisoner go free. The nobleman's face contorts with fury as he realizes her betrayal. He bellows at the top of his lungs about her incredible ingratitude. Joseph reminds the trembling maid that he was the one who saved her from slavery. Tina stands silently under the harsh light of the dungeon torches. The Lord demands to know why she would ever help such a lowly commoner. She clutches her precious pendant tightly as she recalls her childhood dream. Tears well up in her eyes while she thinks of the meal Ryuji provided. Spreading her arms wide, she declares that she will never let them kill him. Joseph scoffs at her sentiment and signals for a guard to draw his blade. Tina flinches in terror as the sharp steel reflects the dim candlelight. From within the shadows of the cell, Ryuji finally speaks up with a calm voice. The nobleman sneers at the prisoner's interruption and promises a swift death. Joseph narrows his eyes, determined to end the defiance once and for all. Joseph lunges forward with his blade, aiming a lethal strike toward the defenseless maid. Tina gasps in puri horror as she watches the nobleman charge toward her. Suddenly, a massive shockwave erupts from inside the cell as the iron bars shatter. Ryuji bursts through the door, swinging his thick gal-ass mug to slam the e-bars into Joseph. The nobleman and his guards scream in terror as the heavy metal door flies toward them. Dust and debris fill the air while the iron gate crashes onto the stone floor. Joseph and his mien find themselves pinned helplessly beneath the weight of the prison bars. Holding his hay-ball mug aloft, Ryuji boasts about the durability of its HEV glass bottom. Tina watches with a stunned expression, still holding tea keys she no longer needs. Stepping forward, Ryuji plants his foot on the fallen gate to keep Joseph Giar grounded. He leans down to look the nobleman in the eye, delivering a cold final where running, turning his basik on the defeated lord. Ruji begins H's casual stroll out of the dungeon. Tina stands in a daze, completely bewildered by the sudden turn of events. Catching up to the maid, Ruji admits he could have escaped much earlier. He looks back over his shoulder, explaining that he simply wanted to finish his drink first. A look of pure surprise crosses Tina's face as she listens to his eccentric reasoning. The tension finally breaks as she starts to smile at the absurdity of it all. She bursts into a fit of joyful laughter while following him toward the castle exit. Leaving the dark F fortress behind, the pair walks together down the long Montaigne road. Tina offers a cheerful farewell to her old life as the Y head toward the city. Ruji turns his head back to nonchalantly inform Tina that she is coming along with him. Tina points to herself in utter shock, questioning if he truly intends for her to join. Standing tall against the breeze, Ruji prepares to explain his personal criteria for people he likes. He recalls unpleasant memories of superficial women from his past world who only cared about social status. Tina watches him from behind, confused by his modern terminology but sensing his deep-seated annoyance. With a gentle expression, Ryuji reveals that he genuinely likes people who eat food with great relish. A soft blush creeps onto Tina's face as she processes his surprisingly kind words. He quickly shifts the mood by calculating how having a maid will boost his future video views. Realization dawns on Tina as she understands that she is finally allowed to pursue her own happiness. A radiant and genuine smile lights up her face, reflecting her newfound hope for the future. The pair travels down a winding dirt path under the brilliance of a high midday sun. Their journey takes them through a lush forest, where sunlight filters softly through the dense canopy. Tina looks ahead with optimism, carrying a small, wide-eyed pig companion nestled on her shoulder. She reflects on her first encounter with Ruji while he was still locked behind prison bars. Basking in her freedom, Tina stares up at the trees, grateful to have left the mansion behind. Her expression shifts to one of concern as she glances over at her eccentric new traveling partner. Ruji begins to stagger and moan, desperately leaning on a wooden staff while craving a drink. A strange, toothy chest snaps its lid at him while he bickers with the living container. He argues that he lacks the physical coordination to walk straight without a steady supply of alcohol. Tina suggests that he simply quit drinking altogether as they disappear further into the winding forest path. Ruji sweatily compares his situation to a zookeeper banning an anteater from eating ants. Tina looks up in total confusion as she listens to Ryuji's strange and nonsensical metaphors. The travelers reach a vast, shimmering lake surrounded by jagged mountain peaks and ruined shacks, where a solitary young girl stands quietly by the shoreline, her gaze fixed on the water. Approaching the child, Tina kindly asks if she belongs to any of the nearby dwellings. Although the silent girl offers no verbal response, maintaining a stoic expression as Tina leans in, Ruji desperately interrupts to ask the child if she knows where he can find a drink. To their surprise, the small girl gives a slow, deliberate nod of affirmation to his request. As she points toward the horizon, Ruji shouts out in a burst of sudden, energized excitement. The group then follows her up a steep, winding trail leading toward a peculiar building. While Ruji continues to struggle with his sobriety, nearly collapsing as the others keep their pace, they eventually arrive at a large dome-roof structure that Tina realizes is a local church. The young girl leads the way inside as she pushes open the tall, ornate iron gates. In the courtyard, an elderly nun frantically tries to manage a group of rowdy, sword-fighting boys. The nun rushes over to greet the girl, expressing her deep worry over the child's disappearance. Ignoring the sentimental reunion, Ruji rudely demands to know if there is any liquor available. Surprisingly, the nun produces a large bottle with a smirk, much to Ryuji's immediate delight. He wastes no time in tipping his head back to chug the beverage with great intensity. Letting out a loud, satisfied roar, the chef feels his strength and spirit fully return. Ruji and the spirited nun soon share a toast at a table, laughing together as they drink. Sister Karen introduces herself as the head of the church and orphanage while holding her glass. Ruji identifies himself and refers to Tina as his subordinate, sparking her immediate annoyance. As they sit around a large outdoor table, Karen asks what brings them to the area. Nearby, several energetic children play and point at a small creature perched in a tree. Karen pours more wine while listening to the story of their escape from the Lord's mansion. Tina reacts with absolute shock when told she smells. Sniffing herself repeatedly in total disbelief, Ryuji and Karen laugh boisterously, mocking the strong scent of alcohol clinging to the maid. Following a quick change of clothes, Tina emerges wearing a fresh adventurer's outfit provided by Karen. She expresses her sincere gratitude to the nun, feeling much more comfortable and clean now. Through a grid window, the young girl watches the group with a quiet and observant gaze. Karen's expression turns somber as she begins to recount the details of the girl's tragic past. A dark flashback shows a terrifying monster destroying the girl's village and killing her parents. The memory focuses on the horrific moment. Blood splashes across the young child's traumatized face. Karen explains that the girl has been unable to speak or laugh since that day. Tina looks down with a sorrowful expression, feeling a deep sense of empathy for the orphan. Karen picks up a basket, mentioning they are celebrating the girl's first anniversary at the church. She decides to go pick flowers to make the simple occasion feel more special and festive. Tina watches from the doorway as the nun and the girl head out into the yard. Meanwhile, Ryuji plays with the orphans, chasing them around the courtyard with boisterous energy. Tina stares ahead with a determined and serious expression as she considers their next move. Tina walks across the church courtyard, calling out to find Ryuji's whereabouts. A voice suddenly calls out to her, catching the maid off guard. She discovers Ryuji hanging upside down from a tree branch while casually drinking wine. Looking up at him, Tina asks if he could prepare a special meal for the orphans. Ryuji immediately refuses the request with a smug and lazy expression. His blunt dismissal causes Tina to glare at him with growing irritation. He explains that he cannot cook for everyone and must conserve their limited ingredients. Hanging precariously, he argues that one delicious meal would only make their daily food taste worse. Tina stands her ground, refusing to accept his cynical outlook on the situation. She passionately declares that eating his food brought her immense happiness, regardless of the future. She continues by reminding him that he taught her the joy of being truly satisfied. Ryuji stares at her in silence, clearly moved by her sincere and heartfelt words. He glances away for a moment, contemplating the impact his cooking has on others. With a sudden burst of energy, he flips himself upright and lands gracefully on the branch. He confidently promises to cook a dish that will leave the children completely stunned. Stepping into his professional chef persona, he enthusiastically introduces himself to an imaginary audience. He pulls a confused Tina into the frame, instructing her to act as his kitchen assistant. Setting up a smartphone to record, he explains his plan to document their culinary adventures. With a fierce and determined shout, he announces the official start of the cooking session. He immediately gets to work, skillfully dicing onions with incredible speed and rhythmic precision. Ryuji begins kneading the ground meat, explaining that adding gelatin is the key to locking in juices, then carefully presses the mixture into a thick, uniform patty to demonstrate the proper technique. Causing Tina to gaze at the raw meat with wide eyes and genuine curiosity. Seeing her interest, Ryuji suddenly hands over the bowl and tells her she should try it. Tina recoils in shock, waving her hands frantically while claiming she could never do such a thing. But Ryuji reminds her that she wants the orphans to enjoy a truly delicious meal. He thrusts the bowl toward her again, insisting that she must take part in the process. Nervously accepting the task, Tina holds the ingredients while Ryuji starts recording the scene on his phone. She begins tentatively patting the meat under his watchful eye as he continues his filming. Concentrating with intense focus, she struggles to keep the mixture together despite her growing anxiety. The resulting patty looks like a messy, unformed glob through the lens of the smartphone camera. Despite her initial failure, Ryuji offers praise that makes her face light up with newfound confidence. The prepared patties are finally placed into a hot pan, producing a loud and satisfying sizzle. A savory sauce is carefully drizzled over the cooked meat to complete the flavorful dish. The final product is presented as a magnificent supreme hamburger, garnished with fresh greens. A detailed list reveals the exact measurements for every ingredient needed to recreate the masterpiece. The process begins by sautéing finely chopped onions in butter until they reach a golden brown. All the primary components are then combined into a single bowl for thorough and vigorous mixing. The patties are shaped with a slight indentation before being fried under a closed lid. Finally, the chef simmers a rich blend of soy sauce and garlic to create the perfect finishing sauce. Tina teleports to the dining table with her utensils ready, catching Ryuji completely off guard. She eagerly takes a large bite of the hamburger with a look of intense anticipation. Her eyes fly open in sudden shock as the complex flavors hit her palate. Overwhelmed with joy, she exclaims how delicious the meat is, while Ryuji watches with satisfaction. Ryuji boasts that this recipe is his ultimate pride. As Tina continues eating voraciously, he abruptly stops speaking when he notices a strange change in her physical state. The overwhelming flavor causes Tina to literally melt into a blissful puddle on her seat. In a distant location, the imposing Countess Floria stands before a castle while listening to a noble's pleas. She quickly silences the whining man with a sharp reprimand and a dismissive gesture. Her attention shifts to a small bottle of high-quality salt recovered from the intruders. She then delicately tastes a few grains of the seasoning directly from her fingertip. Her expression immediately transforms into one of utter amazement at the salt's incredible purity. Snapping her fingers, she summons a kneeling armored subordinate to her side. She sternly commands her soldier to immediately track down and capture the two fugitives. Returning to the orphanage, the long table is finally covered with fresh plates of steaming food. Ryuji raises his voice and commands the group of children to dig in and eat. The orphans respond with blank, hollow stares that leave the chef feeling confused and disappointed. He desperately tries to explain that hamburgers are supposed to be a child's favorite food. One young boy looks up and innocently asks what it means for food to be delicious. Tina smiles warmly and tells him that experiencing something delicious is a moment of pure happiness. Ryuji looks down at the silent orphan boy sitting before a plate of freshly cooked food. He speaks gently to the child about how much effort Tina put into the meal. A spark of curiosity flickers in Pastel's eyes as he listens to the chef's words. The boy looks down at the steaming hamburger steak and tentatively picks up his fork. He raises a small piece of the glistening meat to examine it more closely. Pastel opens his mouth to eat while the chef and the maid watch with anticipation. The head sister of the orphanage suddenly appears and screams for them to stop. Everyone at the table jumps in surprise at the woman's loud and angry arrival. The nun confronts Ryuji and asks if he knows about the kingdom's strict food laws. She mentions that eating anything other than the distributed bread rations is strictly forbidden. Ryuji points out the sister's hypocrisy as she stands there eating her own meal. The woman begins a long rant about the starvation and hardships of her own past. She drinks from a bottle while arguing that guaranteed rations are better than freedom. Tina and Ryuji watch her with skeptical expressions as she continues her dramatic justification. Stepping forward, Tina calmly tells the sister that she is aware of the legal risks. She passionately declares that this food is the only way to make the children smile. The nun yells back and warns them not to involve the children in their defiance. A heavy silence falls between the two women as they glare at one another. Pastel turns his attention back to the piece of meat held in his shaking hand. Ryuji reaches out and gently helps the boy guide the fork for a life-changing first taste. Pastel's eye captures a reflection of the chef as the flavors hit for the first time. Glancing up with a full mouth, the child begins to chew the tender meat slowly. A look of absolute serenity and joy spreads across Pastel's face with every savory bite. Tina stares in shock at the child's reaction, her mouth hanging open in utter amazement. The maid stands frozen while the head sister watches her with a surprised expression. Gesturing wildly toward the table, Tina shouts for the nun to witness the miraculous smile. The older woman trembles and nearly loses her glasses as she sees the child's happiness. Peering intensely through her spectacles, the sister is suddenly overwhelmed by a flood of memories. She remembers the day Pastel's parents first brought their young child to the village. Watching from the sidelines, the nun recalls the warmth the small family once shared. The memory of the parents embracing their laughing child plays vividly in her mind. Snapping back to the present, the sister admits she had forgotten something truly important. A rare and gentle smile touches her lips as she turns to walk away. Hearing the change in tone, Tina's eyes sparkle with tears of relief and excitement. The maid bows deeply toward the departing nun while shouting her heartfelt thanks. The other orphans quickly rise from their seats and eagerly ask if they can eat. Ryuji lets out a loud cheer and tells all the children to dig into the feast. A celebratory atmosphere fills the orphanage as everyone gathers around the table for the meal. Pastel laughs joyfully while wearing a handmade crown of flowers upon his head. Near the edge of the fence, a sinister clawed foot steps onto the orphanage grounds. Faint scratches on the wooden post indicate something large has been lurking nearby. Tina leans back in exhaustion from her feast while Ryuji prepares another drink. The chef stares at his bottle in disappointment when the last drop falls. Stepping forward with a thumbs-up, Pastel offers to fetch another bottle. Ryuji questions if the young child is truly up for the errand alone. Pastel and his tiny winged companion walk across the grass toward the shed. The boy carefully scans the rows of bottles inside the dark storage room. A strange cracking noise from outside causes the child to pause and listen. He slowly pushes the door open and peeks out to investigate the sound. A massive, monstrous boar with glowing eyes suddenly towers over the entire yard. A terrifying vision of destruction flashes as the beast begins its violent rampage. Looking back toward the table, Pastel sees his friends still eating and laughing. The group remains blissfully unaware of the giant predator stalking just behind them. Pastel squeezes his eyes shut and grips the glass bottle with all his strength. A vision of his parents' loving faces gives him the strength to move. His expression hardens into a look of fierce determination as his eyes open. Screaming a loud warning, the boy alerts the entire orphanage to the danger. Tina's face pales in horror as she sees the monster looming over Pastel. The head nun grabs a farm tool and orders the children to flee. Pastel remains standing alone to face the huffing beast and protect his home. The massive boar lets out a terrifying roar as it towers over the paralyzed young boy. Pastel looks up in complete shock while a glass bottle rolls harmlessly across the grass. Ruji suddenly draws his shimmering kitchen knife with a blinding flash of silver light. Leaping through the air, the chef delivers a powerful strike against the monstrous beast. The spectators watch the display of skill with their mouths agape in utter disbelief. Having dispatched the threat, Ryuji casually tilts back a bottle for a refreshing drink. Tina sinks to her knees in pure relief as the tension finally leaves the air. A pair of birds glide peacefully through the sky as the chaos settles down. Ryuji and Tina eventually wave one last time before heading back down the road. The children and the head nun cheer loudly while seeing their protectors off. Tina breaks into a fit of emotional sobbing as they leave the orphanage behind. The pair continues their journey through a forest filled with strange and lumpy trees. Looking up with a bright expression, Tina praises the chef for his amazing work. Ryuji stops to remind her that she was the one who actually prepared the food. He explains his philosophy that his true job is making cooking accessible for everyone. Tina listens carefully as he describes the joy that comes from creating a meal. The chef turns to ask her if she truly enjoyed the experience of cooking. A vision of Pastel's satisfied face reminds her of the happiness they shared. Tina beams with a radiant smile as she admits how much fun she had. Ryuji watches her with a knowing look of satisfaction as they walk together. Ryuji excitedly claps his hands together while announcing his plans for a new culinary challenge. Focusing intently, the chef declares his intention to cook the meat from the monster they defeated. Tina stares back with a look of pure confusion as her small companion watches on silently. The mood shifts when Tina informs him that monster meat is notoriously inedible in this world. Ryuji's eyes widen in absolute horror at the realization that his prize might be worthless. Tina remains firm, stating that the inedibility of monsters is common knowledge among all local adventurers. Refusing to give up, Ryuji shouts out the name of his special kitchen skill to proceed. He leaps into a mystical pocket dimension and demands that his sentient refrigerator produce the stored meat. The magical appliance grows a mouth and arm, bickering loudly with its master while Tina watches. A physical struggle breaks out between the chef and his stubborn equipment as they trade insults. Panting with exhaustion, Ryuji gives up and begs Tina to try a more diplomatic approach. Tina cautiously steps forward to address the living machine in hopes of resolving the conflict. Putting on a charming display, she politely asks the refrigerator to release the monster's carcass. The sentient appliance responds with a look of utter disgust at her attempt to be cute. Losing her patience instantly, Tina violently grabs the machine's tongue and begins shaking it in rage. A massive slab of gray and unappealing monster meat finally drops onto the kitchen counter. Ryuji examines the foul-looking ingredient with a grimace, while Tina points out her earlier warning. The chef falls to the floor in a state of complete and utter mental defeat. Tears stream down Ryuji's face as the curtains seemingly close on his grand culinary journey. The scene fades out on the messy kitchen with Ryuji still mourning his failed cooking experiment. Tina looks puzzled while the sentient refrigerator talks back to her. She tentatively pokes the gray monster meat with her finger as a small creature watches. Suddenly, a bright light erupts from her necklace as she lets out a startled scream. The focus shifts to the pendant around Tina's neck, featuring a dragon-like engraving. The jewelry glows with an intense magical energy that illuminates the entire room. Both characters stare in awe as the meat transforms into a pristine white slab. The refrigerator explains that Tina's unique skill has purified the monster meat into high-quality food. Tina laughs heartily at her success while Ryuji starts preparing his cooking station. The chef begins searing the ingredients in a pan while Tina watches him with anticipation. Taking a cautious bite of his creation, Ryuji tests the flavor of the cooked meat. An extreme close-up captures his eye widening in shock at the incredible taste. Ryuji exclaims with delight that the monster meat is actually high-grade pork. He notes how the boar-like monster provides better quality meat than ordinary animals. Grabbing Tina's shoulder, Ryuji praises her for having such an amazing support skill. The chef announces with renewed energy that his first monster dish is officially underway. A dramatic shout signals the beginning of his new culinary challenge. Ryuji and Tina introduce themselves like show hosts while presenting a large white radish. The chef places a bowl of dried flakes into a microwave to prepare them. Tina carefully peels the radish while Ryuji drinks from a large mug in the background. Slices of the purified monster meat sizzle on the hot grill as the cooking continues. Tina carefully sprinkles the prepared dried flakes over the simmering dish in the kitchen. The large chunks of radish and meat bubble together in a rich, savory sauce. Ryuji proudly presents the finished masterpiece of braised monster meat and radish. A detailed list specifies the exact measurements of ingredients needed for the recipe. The first step involves heating bonito flakes in a microwave before crushing them into powder. Chunks of meat and radish are added to a hot pan to begin the searing process. Liquid seasoning and the crushed flakes are poured in to create a flavorful base. The final seasonings are added while the chef stir-fries the ingredients to perfection. Deciding to eat outdoors, Ryuji and Tina carry their table and chairs into the field. An unexpected visitor's armored boot steps into view as the duo prepares their meal. A knight in gleaming silver armor suddenly appears and shouts at them for being criminals. The man introduces himself as Heinen, a loyal subordinate serving under the local earl. Completely unbothered, Ryuji and Tina continue their conversation about the yellow mustard's spiciness. Heine's eyes narrow with growing frustration as he realizes he is being ignored. The steam continues to rise from the plate of perfectly cooked pork and radish. The knight glares intently while noting that their meal violates the local food laws. Ryuji casually holds out a piece of food and asks if the knight wants a taste. The chef explains that the meal is made from purified monster meat, shocking the knight. Heine remains stern and refuses to believe their ridiculous claims about eating monsters. Reaching for his weapon, the knight declares that the two must be taken into custody immediately. A forceful bite is taken of the steaming monster meat just as the confrontation begins. The knight clenches his metal gauntlets together while activating a powerful combat skill. Steam billows from the warrior's armor, while Ryuji calmly takes a sip from his glass. The armored man slides his boot across the dry ground to find his footing. Heine lunged forward with incredible speed while Ryuji watches the attack with a bored expression. With a single sharp clap of his hands, the chef unleashes a shockwave that sends the knight flying. Leaving the defeated soldier face down in the dirt, the duo prepares to resume their meal. Tina picks up a tender piece of radish with her chopsticks to begin tasting. Her eyes sparkle with joy as the incredible flavors of the dish overwhelm her senses. The maid exclaims that the meat is perfectly soft and the radish has soaked up all the broth. She notes that the crushed flakes have added a surprising and savory depth to every bite. The feast eventually ends with only empty plates and a used glass remaining on the table. Ryuji leans back and shares his dream of traveling to cook even more legendary monsters. Tina suggests that registration with the Adventurers Guild would make their future travels much easier. The chef realizes that becoming an adventurer is the perfect way to earn money for wine. Pointing toward the horizon, Ryuji declares that they will head to the town of Clint next. As they walk through a lush forest, the chef reaches up to pick a piece of fruit. Ryuji remembers a busy day in his past when he served a mountain of food to Tina. Another memory shows the maid dragging him across the floor after he had too much to drink. Back in the present, Ryuji waves to his companion as they continue their journey toward civilization. Emerging from the forest, Tina looks absolutely thrilled to have finally reached their destination. The duo gazes down at the spectacular town of Clint, built atop a massive stone bridge. A mysterious bystander watches the bustling city from a distance with a contemplative look. Hidden beneath the shade of a tree, a silent observer tracks the pair's progress. Tina shouts in excitement as they enter the lively streets filled with merchants and travelers. They pass by a weapon stall showcasing a variety of sharp swords and heavy axes. Another shop nearby displays sturdy armor sets and peculiar magical items for aspiring heroes. Despite the vibrant atmosphere, Ryuji admits that his excitement hasn't quite kicked in yet. Tina playfully puts on a pair of round ears and asks where to go next. The chef ignores the games and starts running toward a shop filled with wine bottles. A quiet corner of the marketplace shows more small stalls tucked away between buildings. Ryuji suddenly remembers his modern Japanese cash, but realizes it is completely worthless here. A local shopkeeper holds up a silver coin with confusion. declaring it a total fake. Realizing their financial predicament, the chef learns that Tina fled home without any money. The maid suggests that their first priority must be visiting the Adventurers Guild to work. They soon stand before a grand building adorned with a majestic bird and sword emblem. Two smartly dressed receptionists greet the newcomers with polite but professional smiles. Stepping forward with confidence, Tina announces their intention to register as official adventurers. The staff members exchange a knowing glance while taking in the pair's unconventional appearance. The woman with glasses bluntly tells them that neither looks suited for the dangerous life of an adventurer. Ryuji envisions a weeping old man lamenting his lost youth through a dramatic poem. The receptionist reluctantly agrees to let them take the entrance exam anyway. Calling out for a special staff member to handle the physical evaluation, a tall, blank-faced bear mascot wearing overalls steps into the room. Tina stares in disbelief at the bizarre creature standing before them. The woman explains that the bear's hug measures a candidate's potential. Without warning, the mascot lunges forward and traps Tina in a bone-crushing embrace. The maid's face turns pale as she struggles to breathe under the pressure. Delirious from the pain, she starts imagining a giant pig eating a feast. Ryuji is grabbed next and immediately notices the mascot reeks of strong booze. The bear's ears twitch as it registers the chef's insulting observation. Its face begins to vibrate violently with a terrifying aura of pure rage. A colossal dragon phantom looms behind the mascot as it prepares to strike. A heavy wooden crate suddenly drops from the ceiling onto the bear's head. Dazed and trembling, the mascot falls to its knees while everyone watches. The bear mumbles about its exhaustion and decides to quit right there. The receptionist fruitlessly shouts for the mascot to return to work. Tina cheers with joy as she finally receives her official adventure certificate. A digital message confirms their new status as registered members of the guild. The staff member presents a job notice while warning that it's far too dangerous. Ryuji points at a flyer for a minotaur hunt in a nearby dungeon. Tina suggests starting with something safer like finding a lost cat instead. Ryuji considers that a bovine monster means he can finally cook a certain dish. He enthusiastically announces his plan to make a delicious beef stew. The chef vividly describes the tender meat melting the moment it hits the tongue. He continues his sensory description of the rich and flavorful soup base. Tina stares at him with wide, starry eyes as her appetite grows. She suddenly grabs Ryuji and demands they go defeat the monster immediately. A spear slams into the floor to stop their hasty departure. A tall, elegant woman with short hair and a staff stands before them. She introduces herself as Shiori, a researcher from the city of Fukuro. Tina reacts with shock at the mention of the prestigious city while Ryuji looks confused. The chef falls over in a comedic tumble after the maid admits she actually knows nothing. Shiori explains that Fukuro is a legendary capital of wisdom reserved for elite scholars. She gazes down at them with a cold look of intellectual superiority. Ryuji retorts with a smirk, mocking her for acting like an elitist academic. He closes his eyes and chuckles at her attempt to look down on them. The chef explains that his past as a social media influencer made him immune to insults. He changes the subject as he notices someone else moving on the stairs. Ryuji points out that Shiori has been watching them since they were outside the city. Shiori realizes that Ryuji detected her presence from an incredible distance. Ryuji continues his mockery, suggesting that the scholars of Fukuro are overrated. The researcher remains silent while staring intensely at the brass chef. She eventually sighs and crosses her arms, agreeing to hire the pair. Ryuji accepts the contract on the condition that he receives an advance for alcohol. Shiori's expression sours immediately at the mention of drinking. She launches into a stern lecture about how alcohol wastes time and dulls the mind. The chef becomes annoyed and tells Tina he wants to cancel the request. Tina throws a loud tantrum, insisting she must have her beef stew. Ryuji gives in while Shiori continues to doubt their combat capabilities. A look of absolute confidence and pride fills the chef's features. He strikes a bold pose and claims that culinary researchers are the strongest. The scene shifts as they approach the dark entrance of the Lyra district dungeon. Tina looks worriedly at Ryuji, questioning his sudden and strange demeanor. The chef suddenly looks completely helpless and dazed with drool on his face. A terrifying vision of a massive minotaur warns of their impending doom. The group arrives at the grand stone entrance of a temple-like ruin. Shiori explains that many dungeons are actually remnants of a lost civilization. They make their way inside a cavernous hall filled with ancient debris. A small horned creature with a striped tail watches them from the dark. Tina explains that monsters from dungeons often attack local villages. Ryuji declares that exterminating monsters is a vital task for adventurers. The chef stops as Shiori inspects the area with a massive lens. Shiori reveals that her main goal is to secure a minotaur horn. Ryuji reacts with disgust to a mental image of cooked monster horn. The researcher explains the necessity of gathering materials to become a sage. Tina reacts with shock and admiration to the mention of a sage. Shiori looks down as she describes the path to ultimate wisdom. Ryuji and Tina humorously bow and offer prayers to the future sage. Tina expresses her fear of the dungeon, while Shiori eats a snack. The maid watches in silence as the researcher ignores her surroundings. Ryuji asks Shiori about the bread she is eating during their journey. The chef requests a piece of the plain ration to taste it himself. He sticks out his tongue in total disgust at the bland flavor. Shiori argues that food is purely for nutrition and taste is unnecessary. Ryuji compares her cold logic to people who use supplements in his world. He focuses his gaze and considers the misery of such a diet. The chef warns Shiori that eating without joy will kill her heart. The researcher stares back in silence after hearing his unexpected warning. She quickly moves on to describe the lethal threat of the Minotaur. Shiori vividly describes the gruesome fate of fallen adventurers, making Tina sweat with intense fear. Tina begs the researcher to stop her dark lecture, while Ryuji stands calmly in the background. Ryuji reassures the terrified maid by promising to slice through their enemy with ease. The party travels deeper into the dungeon as Ryuji dreams of cooking a delicious beef stew. The trio hides behind a stone wall to observe a strange creature lurking in the cavern. Ryuji lightheartedly wears a bone mask and dances with sighs to amuse his confused companions. The chef and Tina push against a massive wooden wheel to activate a dungeon mechanism. Shiori signals for the group to stop before a dark, bone-filled entrance to a boss chamber. A colossal minotaur stands amidst a pile of human skulls while clutching a massive battle axe. Tina peeks from behind a pillar and nervously suggests they should consider retreating immediately. Ryuji looks down at the trembling maid and admits a specific question has crossed his mind. The chef wonders aloud if the monster's flesh actually tastes like high-quality beef. Ryuji and Tina suddenly turn their attention toward a shelf filled with large ceramic containers. Several jars of alcohol sit on a stone ledge, marked with peculiar handwritten labels. Shiori reveals that the Minotaur loves alcohol, causing Ryuji to react with visible shock. The researcher explains that the monsters even have their own version of a bottle service. Ryuji's face hardens as he decides to defeat the beast and claim the booze. The chef steps out into the open and taunts the massive creature with a challenge. Ryuji summons his magical cooking utensils and prepares to engage the beast in combat. He suddenly staggers and breaks into a cold sweat as his strength mysteriously begins to drain. Ryuji collapses to his knees as his physical energy abruptly deserts him. The chef's face turns deathly pale while Shiori monitors his symptoms through her lens. Ryuji lets out a desperate cry of agony as his vision begins to blur. A distorted image of a man in a t-shirt flashes through the chef's failing mind. Tina reacts with horror to the sudden and unexplained weakness of their leader. The massive Minotaur looms behind the party, while the researcher notes Ryuji's mana depletion. The maid turns to her companion for advice as their chances of survival plummet. Shiori suddenly disappears into the darkness, leaving a mere afterimage behind as she flees. Tina struggles to drag the weakened chef away from the approaching monster. A giant hand reaches down and snatches Ryuji by his leg with terrifying ease. The monster holds the helpless chef upside down while Tina looks on in shock. The Minotaur delivers a devastating kick that launches Ryuji across the dungeon chamber. The chef's body hurtles through the air with violent force after the beast's attack. Ryuji slams into a stone wall, causing a cloud of dust to erupt around him. Tina watches in tearful disbelief as her friend lies broken among the rubble. The chef remains unconscious with a severe head injury as blood stains the floor. The colossal beast stands triumphantly over its fallen foe, while the maid trembles. Ryuji's battered face remains still as his companion's desperate cries echo through the room. Elsewhere in the labyrinth, Shiori walks calmly through a dark corridor alone. The researcher stoically continues her retreat while considering the grim outcome of the encounter. Shiori narrows her eyes while muttering about the extra work her companions are causing. The researcher reflects on the importance of learning from failure as she stands over ancient ruins. She diligently records her observations in a small notebook, despite the chaos nearby. The woman suddenly halts her retreat as a realization strikes her during the quiet moment. A memory of Ryuji sharing his simple food flashes through her mind as she hesitates. Meanwhile, the Minotaur strikes the ground with its massive axe, narrowly missing the unconscious chef. Tina cries out for her friend to wake up as the beast towers over them. A small, determined pig familiar leaps into the fray while clutching a kitchen knife. The monster bellows a deafening roar that echoes through the crumbling stone chamber. Tina cowers in fear as the giant raises its weapon for a lethal blow. A blinding flash of solar energy erupts from Shiori's lens, illuminating the dark room. The intense light blast strikes the creature's eyes, forcing it to recoil in pain. Shiori steps forward into the clearing while her magical tool continues to glow. She quickly returns to the fallen chef's side as Tina questions her sudden reappearance. The researcher looks away silently while the maid continues to glare at her. Shiori offers a flimsy excuse about her whereabouts while helping to shield Ryuji. The Minotaur grunts and shakes off the effects of the blinding magic. The massive beast rises to its full height once more, ready to resume the hunt. Tina prepares herself for another clash as a mysterious pendant begins to react. The monster swings its axe with incredible force, shattering the stone floor beneath it. The two-headed beast scans the chamber with a bewildered expression. Tina suddenly plunges through a swirling portal and crashes directly onto Ryuji in his sleek kitchen. She looks around the modern room in total disbelief at her new surroundings. The talking refrigerator bellows an urgent command as the group scrambles on the tiled floor. Confusion spreads across the maid's face as she tries to process the sudden shift. Shiori clutches her head while struggling to comprehend the spatial magic and the strange environment. The refrigerator explains that Ryuji is in a critical state and must be saved immediately. Tina stares in shock at the shouting appliance, while the researcher remains dazed nearby. The sentient machine demands that a meal be cooked right this instant. It reveals that eating a delicious dish will grant them a necessary power-up. Tina protests that she lacks the skills to cook anything worthwhile on her own. The refrigerator doubles down and insists that she is the only one who can do it. She screams in pure horror upon learning they only have a 5-minute time limit. Her eye reflects the mounting panic of the impossible culinary deadline. The girl continues to shout back at the appliance about her lack of talent. Her voice cracks as she admits to being far too clumsy for such a feat. Ryuji finally begins to stir and sits up while Tina watches him intently. The chef tells her to settle down as he regains his senses on the floor. He places a steady hand on the ground to anchor himself against the confusion. Ryuji smirks and promises to teach her a special recipe that even she can master. Tina stares at a pull-tab tuna can, while Ryuji provides instructions from behind her. She uses chopsticks to vigorously mix the contents directly inside the small metal container, after which the seasoned meat is carefully poured over a tray of steaming white rice. A celebratory banner marks the official completion of the simple yet satisfying tuna rice bowl. The exact proportions of sauces and seasonings for the recipe appear in a detailed text box. A rough sketch illustrates the first step of adding various liquids and spices to the can. The second diagram shows the final motion of emptying the mixture onto a bowl of rice. Tina gasps in disbelief at the speed of the cooking as the refrigerator shouts at her. She places her hands together to offer a quick thanks before starting the meal. The girl finally takes a large, eager bite of the tuna rice using her chopsticks. An explosive flavor reaction sends her into a dreamlike state, wearing a giant tuna fish costume. Tears of pure culinary joy stream down her face as she urges Shiori to try it. The researcher remains skeptical and points a finger while questioning the legality of the intense flavor. Tina snaps back at her friend's hesitation while the girl finally prepares to take a mouthful. Shiori chews the food slowly with a very serious and analytical expression on her face. She continues to ponder the taste as she keeps her mouth full of the savory rice. A sudden spark of realization crosses her eyes as the deliciousness finally hits her. The refrigerator barks out more orders and insists they listen to the plan while they eat. It explains that Ryuji needs a specific alcoholic drink from this world to fully recover his strength. Tina looks on in absolute shock as she is ordered to steal the booze from the monster. The refrigerator explains that the meal has boosted their physical abilities enough to reach a new height. Tina trembles with fear as she visualizes the terrifying horned monster she must face. Ryuji pants with exhaustion while requesting a portion of the meal he just cooked. Tina watches with concern as the chef prepares to take a bite of the tuna rice. He closes his eyes and chews carefully to experience the full flavor of the simple dish. A confident smirk crosses his face as he confirms the food tastes excellent. Ryuji places his chopsticks down on the table to signal the end of his tasting. He lets out a heavy sigh of relief as the nutrients begin to restore his energy. The chef suddenly urges the girls to abandon him and escape for their own safety. The refrigerator screams in anger at Ryuji for suggesting such a reckless and suicidal plan. Ryuji looks at Tina and acknowledges the suffering she endured after her mother's death. He reminds her that she has finally discovered the true happiness of eating delicious food. With an intense shout, he commands the young girl to survive no matter what. He continues his speech by declaring that no corrupt food laws should ever restrict their lives. The chef tells her to live for the sake of making and eating wonderful meals. Tears fill Tina's eyes as she listens to Ryuji's selfless and inspiring final words. He jokingly asks for alcohol to be poured on his grave before the refrigerator snaps. The talking appliance barks out that their time is officially over as static fills the air. The kitchen sanctuary suddenly dissolves and sends the group spinning back into the real world. Everyone crashes onto the stone floor right in the path of the menacing bull monster. The menacing bull monster glares down at its prey with its glowing eye and heavy nose ring. Tina stands her ground against the towering beast while Ryuji remains vulnerable on the stone floor. Ryuji grips a ladle and yells for the girls to escape while he distracts the creature. He is visibly stunned when Tina stubbornly refuses to leave him behind to face certain death. Tina admits her intense fear while clenching her trembling hands in a show of inner conflict. She resolves not to abandon her chef and prepares to strike the monster with her ladle. With a heroic shout, she declares that they will defeat the beast and eat beef stew together. The massive creature looms over the small group as Tina points her kitchen tool at it. The bull monster snorts out a blast of hot steam as it prepares to charge the challengers. Ryuji continues to shout in desperation for Tina to run away before the monster strikes. A brief memory shows Ryuji handling seafood in the kitchen during his recent intense cooking marathon. The chef suddenly loses all his remaining strength and collapses face first onto the hard floor. Shiori steps on his head while noting that he has completely exhausted his magic supply. Tina takes command by ordering Shiori to steal the monster's alcohol while she acts as a decoy. She hands her trusted ladle over to the young sage while placing her hopes in her. Shiori looks down at the simple cooking utensil with a stoic and contemplative expression on her face. Tina sprints forward with supernatural speed and realizes the meal has granted her immense physical power. The monster raises its enormous bladed weapon to crush the girl as she closes the distance. Tina performs a graceful slide across the floor to narrowly avoid a devastating downward slash. After images fill the air as she dances around a flurry of heavy strikes from the beast blade. Shiori sprints toward the shelves while Tina continues to serve as a distraction for the beast. Tina narrowly evades a massive downward swing that shatters the stone tiles beneath her feet. Noticing the flank, the bull monster glances back and spots Shiori approaching its jars. A subtle and confident smile plays across a face as the hidden strategy continues to unfold. Tina points a finger and boasts loudly about her incredible speed to the confused monster. She boldly declares her intention to take all of the creature's alcohol for themselves. The monster's ear twitches as it processes the girl's provocative and daring statement. It quickly turns its massive head in realization that the intruders are raiding its storage. On the high shelf, Shiori and her feline companion work together to open a large jar. The young sage suddenly realizes with a start that the monster fully understands their language. The beast's huge fist slams into the wooden shelf to stop Shiori from taking the jars. It grabs a jar and begins drinking the alcohol with a series of greedy gulps. The small group watches in dismay as the monster shatters more jars in a frenzy. Tina panics, realizing Ryuji cannot be revived without the recovery properties of the alcohol. Shiori stands quietly while watching the massive creature consume its stash in the distance. Ryuji remains slumped against a stone pillar in a state of total magical exhaustion. The chef's eyes narrow as he struggles to catch his breath, despite his weakened state. A sharp and focused gaze suggests that a final desperate plan is beginning to form. Tina expresses her sincere regret to Shiori for the failure of their initial plan. Shiori adjusts her grip on the ladle and resolves to utilize a powerful forbidden technique. Shiori explains the dangers of her forbidden technique. Warning that it consumes both body and soul, she focuses her resolve while looking at her ladle, declaring that this is their only path. The sage begins her dark incantation, summoning a servant from the depths of infinite night. A massive chain door materializes as she offers her own blood and soul as a sacrifice. The magical gate trembles violently while Shiori commands the offering for the Rotten King to manifest. The bull monster stops mid-gulp and looks toward the source of the immense magical pressure. Tina screams for her friend to stop as the dark energy intensifies around the summoning circle. The chant continues with poetic descriptions of the sword of chaos and the cup of destruction. A heavy chain strains under the weight of the entity, attempting to cross into reality. The iron lock shatters into pieces as the forbidden gate begins to swing open wide. Another segment of the magical seal breaks apart under the sheer force of the summon. A brilliant flash of light fills the room as the door to tomorrow finally opens. Out from the grand gateway steps a single shivering pigeon with a very nervous expression. Silence falls over the chamber as the tiny bird stands between the heroes and the beast. Both Tina and the monster stare in complete shock at the pathetic result of the spell. Shiori reveals that deceiving Tina was necessary to ensure the monster fell for the diversionary spell. She watches the creature's reaction, confirming that it truly understands the words they speak. While everyone is distracted, a small pig-like familiar sprints forward with a gleaming kitchen knife. Shiori explains her true intent while the monster continues to drink. Unaware of the approaching familiar, the swift familiar leaps toward the monster's 8th lumbar vertebra to deliver a decisive strike. The pig familiar executes a daring leap, driving its kitchen knife into the monster's back. The blade remains firmly embedded in the beast as the small familiar completes its strike. Stunned by the sudden pain, the minotaur freezes with its eyes wide and bulging. Droplets of the stolen liquid spray across the floor from the beast's gaping mouth. The monster coughs violently as it struggles to process the unexpected physical assault. Ryuji sits drenched on the stone floor while the spilled liquid pools around him. He looks down with a dark expression as fluid drips slowly from his hair. A heavy silence falls over the chef as he remains perfectly still and contemplative. Shadows mask his eyes while he continues to endure the humiliation of being soaked. One eye snaps open with a fierce and terrifyingly sharp gaze of pure determination. A flash of magical intensity sparks as the chef finds his hidden inner strength. Ryuji slowly rises to his feet while Shiori frantically warns everyone to back away. Standing tall with clenched fists, he radiates an aura of overwhelming and menacing power. The Minotaur reacts by gripping its jagged axe and preparing for a final confrontation. It lunges forward with a roar, raising the massive weapon high for a killing blow. The weapon slams down with earth-shattering force, sending debris flying in every direction. The beast stands in stunned silence as its giant axe lies broken on the ground. Sweat pours down the monster's face as it realizes its strike had no effect. Shiori and the pig familiar stare in absolute disbelief at the chef's hidden might. Ryuji reaches down to reclaim his cooking tool, ready to settle the score once and for all. Ryuji stares ahead with cold intensity, vowing to pour his soul into this final move. The Minotaur trembles in fear as the chef prepares to deliver a decisive culinary strike. With a mighty roar, Ryuji swings his kitchen tool with enough force to shatter the air. A massive shockwave erupts as the beast is sent flying backwards by the sheer impact. Following the chaotic battle, the group gathers in the kitchen while Ryuji hauls a heavy pot. He scolds his companions for their recklessness, while Shiori reacts with surprise and alarm. The chef continues his loud rant about their near-death experience as the refrigerator monster stands nearby. A lighter atmosphere settles over the room as Shiori laughs at the absurdity of their survival. She pauses for a moment of quiet reflection, grateful that everyone made it out in one piece. Blushing deeply, the young woman clutches her hands together, while the others watch her sudden bashfulness. Her stomach growls loudly, prompting her to complain about her hunger to a weary Ryuji. The chef excitedly announces that it is finally time to prepare a magnificent Minotaur beef stew. He gestures toward the modern kitchen appliances that sit ready for the upcoming cooking process. Ryuji presents a massive slab of raw monster meat to Shiori while the knight looks on. He explains that her special purification skill is essential for making the creature's meat edible. The knight stares in disbelief at the unconventional idea of turning a defeated monster into dinner. Sizzling sounds fill the air as the chef sears the seasoned meat and sautés onions. To enhance the flavor, he pours a glass of the stolen wine from a large jar. The chef takes a careful sip of the dark liquid to test its quality before cooking. His eyes widen in total shock as the incredible taste of the wine overwhelms his senses. Ryuji swishes the dark wine in his glass, acknowledging that monsters apparently hoard truly excellent vintages. Moving on to the preparation, mushrooms are tossed into a hot pan and sautéed in rich butter. The thick stew bubbles intensely on the stove as the various flavors begin to meld together. A beautiful plate of supreme Minotaur beef stew is finally complete and presented with flourish. The full list of ingredients and precise measurements for this monster-themed dish is laid out. Instructions begin with searing the seasoned meat over high heat until it develops a perfect crust. Next, sliced onions and garlic are softened in butter within the same flavorful pan. The meat returns to the pan alongside wine and seasonings to begin a long simmer. Meanwhile, the mushrooms are cooked separately in a different pan to preserve their specific texture. After adding sugar and simmering further, The mushrooms and extra butter are stirred into the main pot. The culinary masterpiece is finished with a drizzle of cream and a garnish of dried parsley. Tina picks up her spoon with great anticipation, noting how easily the meat falls apart. She takes her first bite, her eyes widening as she experiences the intense flavor. Both the maid and her small companion shiver from the sheer delight of the savory meal. A wave of pure culinary bliss washes over Tina as she feels completely revitalized by the taste. She enthusiastically praises Ruji, claiming this is the best meal he has ever prepared for her. Tina insists that the chef try a bite himself, holding out a loaded spoon toward him. Ruji tastes his own creation and closes his eyes, satisfied that the effort was worth it. While Tina continues to feast, the chef watches her with a mixture of exhaustion and pride. Finally, Ruji serves a portion to Shiori while asking why she returned after her initial retreat. Tina gazes forward with wide, shimmering eyes as she reflects on her past struggles. Shiori questions the specific meaning behind the idea of one's heart dying from exhaustion. Ruji looks on with a surprised expression as the maid prepares to explain herself. A high-angle view captures the group lingering by the lamplit table in the darkness. Tina's eyes sparkle intensely while she describes the sudden beauty she saw in the sky. Shiori remains visibly confused by the poetic nature of the maid's explanation. A brief memory shows Tina being scolded by a former employer while feeling perpetually famished. She realizes that her misery prevented her from noticing anything beautiful around her. Ruji offers a soft, knowing smile as he listens to Tina's heartfelt realization. The chef suddenly breaks the mood by announcing that it is time to go outside. The dark leaves of the trees rustle near the pot of freshly prepared stew. Ruji gestures toward a plate and encourages Shiori to finally try his cooking. He promises her that the answers she seeks are found within the meal itself. Shiori stares down at the steaming bowl with a mixture of curiosity and hesitation. The thick sauce and tender chunks of meat are showcased in the bowl. She brings the first spoonful of the savory minotaur stew to her mouth. A look of pure shock flashes in her eyes as the flavor takes hold. Shiori admits the meal is incredible, while Ruji watches her with crossed arms. She slowly turns her gaze upward to see what Tina was talking about earlier. The trio sits beneath a majestic night sky filled with a brilliant river of stars. The vast, star-studded sky stretches across the horizon above the silent, jagged peaks. Tina excitedly leans in to ask Shiori how she feels while Ryuji watches nearby. Ruji playfully remarks that Shiori's expression says everything about her enjoyment of the meal. Shiori keeps her gaze fixed on the shimmering stars with a look of profound wonder. A stack of freshly used plates sits neatly in the corner of the frame. After finishing their dinner, the group gathers in the kitchen as Ryuji starts clearing the table. Tina beams with joy while holding the empty bowls from their hearty stew feast. Shiori suddenly speaks up and asks Tina to let her see the necklace she is wearing. Tina obliges by lifting the silver pendant to give Shiori a better view of the crest. Shiori stares intently at the metal charm while falling into a deep, silent thought. A detailed view shows the intricate dragon design gleaming against the dark background. Tina begins to explain the history of the piece as Shiori listens with curiosity. A memory surfaces of Tina's mother telling her to head for the capital at 16. Shiori asks for more details while Ruji continues working at the sink in the background. Ruji pauses his chores to confirm if a king truly resides in the royal capital. He sets a clean plate into the rack while critiquing the current food laws. Clutching a towel, the chef boldly announces that their journey will lead them to the capital. Tina turns her head back to inquire about what Ruji intends to achieve there. Ruji pours a drink and speaks passionately about starting a world-changing culinary revolution. The chef raises his cup high and dramatically declares his goal to become the king. A surprised voice from inside the guild building questions if the group truly defeated a minotaur. Tina strikes a proud, triumphant pose, while Ruji reminds her that she wasn't the one who defeated it. The receptionist adjusts his glasses and leans in for a closer look at the unbelievable proof. Shock washes over the guild staff as they stare at two coffins prepared in anticipation of their demise. As the clerk nervously stammers that he never expected them to return alive, Tina glares with annoyance. The bustling town streets remain peaceful outside the sturdy stone walls of the adventurers' outpost. A celebratory banner announces their rank advancement, while Tina throws her arms up in jubilation. Ruji wastes no time and slams a pile of gold coins onto the counter to purchase supplies. A messenger owl takes flight to deliver the news as the group watches from the courtyard below. A weather-beaten shop sign creaks in the wind above the entrance to their temporary lodging. Gathering around a wooden table, the trio peers down at an old map spread out before them. Shiori traces a long, winding path across the continent that leads directly to the distant royal capital. She warns them that the kingdom of Taitalt is part of a dangerous federation with lawless regions. The traveler continues her grim explanation about the perils awaiting anyone brave enough to cross the borders. Terrifying monsters roam the desolate lands between cities, making every step of the journey a struggle for survival. Ryuji turns to Tina and poses the blunt question of whether she wants to call it quits. Her fingers tremble slightly as she tightly grasps the silver pendant hanging around her neck. Thinking back to her mother's final request, the young maid finds the courage to push past fear. She throws her head back and loudly proclaims her unwavering decision to reach the capital. Ryuji offers a knowing smirk as he notices Shiori casually snacking on some bread during the speech. Tina expresses disbelief as Shiori claims food is merely for nutrition, while Ryuji stands nearby. A close-up shows Shiori chewing the bland bread as Ryuji insists he can easily improve its flavor. The culinary transformation begins by toasting the bread and spreading a layer of butter. Ryuji piles on shredded cabbage before seasoning it with a blend of aromatic spices. A generous serving of ketchup and mustard is drizzled over a pair of cooked sausages. The finished hot dog radiates a brilliant glow, signaling it is ready for consumption. A comprehensive list outlines the simple ingredients needed to recreate the humble masterpiece. The first instructional step shows the bread being toasted alongside a bowl of melting butter. Moving to the second phase, finely shredded cabbage is placed carefully onto the prepared base. Various seasonings like garlic powder and cumin are added to enhance the vegetable layer. The final step depicts the assembly of heated sausages and the finishing condiments. Shiori takes an enthusiastic bite of the sandwich as Tina looks on with an expectant grin. A massive shockwave of flavor hits Shiori, causing her to cry out in absolute delight. Tina wipes away tears of joy while admitting she can never return to eating tasteless food. Shiori remains in a stunned silence, seemingly overwhelmed by the quality of the quick meal. She then presents Ryuji with a fresh stack of bread and asks him to cook it all. The scene shifts to a tall stone turret reaching toward the clouds in the afternoon sky. Tina approaches the timber frame building as a palm tree casts a shadow across the path. She swings the door open and cheerfully announces her return with hands full of supplies. Shiori pauses her reading to mention that Ryuji grew impatient and headed to the local tavern. Shiori sits at a table and comments on Tina's apparent love for the many bottles of alcohol nearby. A hand gently pets the belly of the small pig creature while Shiori asks for its name. The little creature, named Pirel, lets out a massive yawn while its cuteness is praised. Shiori thanks the small companion for its help before preparing to move on. A close-up focuses on her thoughtful expression as she considers her next steps. Shiori announces her departure for the royal capital. Much to Tina's visible confusion and shock, she stops in her tracks when Tina asks if they aren't traveling together. Tina stands her ground, insisting they should face the sage's trials as a team. Leaning in close, Tina asserts that sharing a delicious meal has already made them true companions. Pirel's stomach lets out a loud growl, breaking the tension as Shiori looks down. Shiori smiles and decides she can tolerate staying with her foolish friends for a little longer. A mysterious metallic orb suddenly rolls across the floor and comes to a halt. The group watches in confusion as the small object bounces into the center of the room. Tina bends down to inspect the strange device, wondering aloud what it could be. Shiori's eyes snap wide as she suddenly recognizes the immediate danger. She screams for everyone to run just as the magical ball begins to erupt. A massive explosion of dense smoke fills the room, obscuring everything in sight. Tina is thrown off balance by the force of the gas as she tries to recover. A heavy armored boot steps through the thick haze as the intruders make their entrance. 3 bird-masked warriors surround the girls and their pet as the ambush is completed. A majestic castle overlooks a massive waterfall as a curious lizard watches from a nearby tree. Ice cubes clink together as they are dropped into a tall, clear glass. A hand with dark, polished nails pops the cork from a mysterious bottle. The golden liquid splashes over the ice, filling the glass to the brim. Tina and Shiori sit bound and helpless while bird-masked guards watch over them. The elegantly dressed woman reclines in her chair, savoring her drink with a confident smirk. Tina's eyes flutter open as she begins to regain consciousness. Her pupils dilate in surprise as the realization of her predicament sets in. Waking fully, she stares in disbelief at the tied-up Shiori beside her. The captor greets the girls with a mocking tone as they struggle against their ropes. Leaning forward, the woman stares down a defiant Tina. Shiori looks on with a cold sweat as she recognizes the person standing before them. Confused by the recognition, Tina asks if her friend truly knows their captor. Shiori recounts the dark legend of the hero who turned into a royal traitor. The woman accepts the description of her villainous past with an indifferent shrug. An agitated man shouts orders from the background as the interrogation continues. Tina suddenly gasps as she remembers Ryuji and worries for his safety. Shiori demands to know the motive behind their kidnapping, while the woman swirls her glass. The heavy doors creak open as the girls hope for Ryuji's escape. A bird-masked warrior drags a defeated Ryuji across the floor to join the prisoners. Tina breaks out in a cold sweat while explaining her confusion about their current situation. Nearby, Ryuji wakes up with a groggy expression, wondering if his restaurant has somehow relocated. He suddenly notices his companions tied to chairs and greets them with an inappropriately cheerful wave. Turning his attention to their captor, the chef casually requests a drink from the elegant woman. He is overjoyed to discover that the golden liquid in his glass is high-quality whiskey. Ryuji leans toward the woman to praise her for providing such a rare luxury in this world. A furious Tina shouts at him to wake up and realize the danger they are in. The chef dismisses her concerns, arguing that anyone who serves good liquor must be a decent person. The woman reveals her role as a food law enforcer tasked with punishing their culinary crimes. She pauses for a moment of dramatic silence to consider the appropriate punishment for the group. Ryuji sprays his drink everywhere in a blind panic when she mentions the possibility of execution. However, the enforcer offers them a chance at freedom if the chef prepares a truly delicious meal. Shiori questions the fairness of this ultimatum while the captor maintains her regal composure. Throwing her head back in laughter, the woman declares that exquisite dining is a noble birthright. She gazes intently at Ryuji, admitting that the presence of a talented chef piqued her personal interest. Ryuji glares back, criticizing her for manipulating the law to satisfy her own selfish cravings. The woman turns away dismissively, mocking him by suggesting a drunkard couldn't possibly cook anything worthwhile. Taking the bait, the chef assumes a grim expression and prepares to meet her challenge head-on. A terrifying aura surrounds Ryuji as he unleashes his demonic culinary persona to begin the trial. The manipulative enforcer watches with a satisfied smirk as her plan to taste his food succeeds. The enforcer presents a massive bound boar creature as the primary ingredient for their life-or-death cooking challenge. Tina objects loudly, claiming monster meat is typically inedible. Though the woman laughs off her outdated common sense, a look of pure astonishment washes over Tina's face as she processes a sudden, mysterious revelation. Sweating under the pressure, she asks how the captor could possibly know such a specific secret. Ryuji urges her to move quickly and start the preparations while he maintains his focused, demonic aura. A montage follows as Tina triumphantly presents a finished cut of meat under the woman's watchful, greedy gaze. The group gathers around a grand table where the centerpiece dish sits surrounded by glowing candles. Laughing maniacally, Ryuji summons his magical kitchen utensils and demonic seasonings from thin air to begin. He seizes the woman's high-quality whiskey, declaring the water of life to be his secret ingredient. The chef seasons the raw meat with salt and pepper before submerging it in a whiskey marinade. He vigorously stirs onions in a sizzling pan, waiting for them to reach a deep caramel color. The marinated meat and honey ginger juices are tossed into the pan to create a savory base. A thick curry roux is added to the mixture, causing the kitchen to fill with an intoxicating aroma. A comprehensive list of the exotic ingredients used for the boar curry is displayed for reference. The first step of the recipe outlines cutting the meat and letting it soak in whiskey. The second stage describes frying cumin seeds and onions together until they are perfectly browned. Step 3 involves searing the meat and adding the leftover marinade, along with grated ginger. The pan is then covered and simmered for 30 minutes with a mixture of water and honey. Once the meat is tender, the curry roux and fresh garlic are stirred into the simmering pot. The culinary masterpiece is completed by adding butter, chicken stock, and a final dash of oyster sauce. The woman inhales the intoxicating aroma of the finished dish. Taking a large, eager bite of the monster meat curry, she is immediately transported into a state of pure culinary bliss as imaginary demons celebrate around her. Ryuji laughs triumphantly, while the captor admits the whiskey served as a perfect secret ingredient. Shiori cautiously asks for their release now that the meal has satisfied the woman's hunger, but the captor smiles cryptically and requests one final favor from the chef. Presenting a dark, jagged stone, she challenges Ryuji to crush the object with his bare hands. Ryuji initially refuses the tedious task, claiming his duties as a cook are already finished. He changes his mind when she offers the rare whiskey as a reward, squeezing the gem with all his might. Shiori watches in disbelief, explaining that the stone is the rarest and hardest material known to their kingdom. Gasping for breath, Ryuji successfully snaps the indestructible crystal in half. Tina wonders how he possesses such incredible strength. Though he brushes it off as an otherworld cheat, he flexes his muscle, explaining that while he was weak in his old life, he is extraordinarily powerful here. The woman places a mysterious bottle on the table while watching Ryuji closely. She remarks that his power is typical for an inhabitant of Earth. Ryuji reacts with sheer shock, asking how she could possibly know about his homeworld. Leaning forward, he demands to know if there are other Earthlings currently trapped in this land. The woman promises to reveal more during their next dinner, provided he continues to cook for her. Tina turns to Shiori and asks for a definition of this mysterious place called Earth. Shiori remains silent and visibly shaken, begging the girl to drop the subject immediately. Sunlight shines brightly over the stone towers and windows of the imposing castle. Tina gleefully mentions that she enjoyed the meal and received a reward for their trouble. Holding the shattered fragments, the woman confirms that her test of Ryuji's power was successful. She narrows her eyes, realizing she has finally discovered the true power of mana purification food. As the glowing shards sparkle in her palm, a small creature runs past the chef and his companions. A predatory smile crosses her face as she plots to use Ryuji for her personal ambitions. Arriving at the coast, Tina and Ryuji stand in amazement at the sight of the Grand Harbor. Tina points toward the distant horizon where the road to the royal capital continues. She clenches her fists in excitement, thrilled to be experiencing her very first voyage across the sea. A desperate traveler yells at a dock worker, demanding a boat immediately and offering to pay double. The man's face contorts with rage as he ignores the warnings about the current danger. Refusing to wait any longer, he boards a small rowboat and prepares to set off alone. Two massive, dripping tentacles emerge silently from the water, right behind the traveler's back. The creature strikes with a violent lunge, causing the man to drop his oars in panic. A massive splash erupts as the boat is dragged deep into the water near the pier. Bubbles rise to the surface while Ryuji and the others watch the disappearance in stunned silence. Ryuji wonders aloud if that was a submarine-style boat, prompting immediate shouting from his friends. The shivering man is rescued from the water as the dock worker names the beast a tentacles. The worker lets out a deep sigh, explaining that the creature has become a major problem recently. Ryuji suggests exterminating the beast, though the man explains it is exceptionally fast at escaping high-ranked hunters. The dock worker warns that no ships can depart until the sea monster finally leaves the area. Realizing their travel plans are stalled, the group gathers on the pier to discuss their next move. Tina's face turns pale as the sudden realization of her ruined dream begins to sink in. Overwhelmed by the news, she dramatically clutches her head and begins to sway in despair. Spinning around in a fit of theatrical grief, she eventually collapses flat onto the wooden docks. Her companion stares down at the motionless girl, while a small creature watches from the side. Tears stream down Tina's face as she loudly wails about the unfairness of missing her voyage. The sun beats down on the quiet coastal building where the group seeks refuge for the night. While Ryuji and his friend enjoy a warm meal, Tina remains hidden under a large blanket. Ryuji points toward the bed and urges her to join them for dinner instead of sulking. He waves a bowl of fragrant food in the air, hoping the delicious scent will entice her. The blanket rustles violently as Tina reacts to the aroma, but refuses to come out entirely. She declares from beneath the covers that she is now a clam who hears absolutely nothing. Ryuji and his friend exchange weary glances, clearly exhausted by her overly dramatic display of sorrow. Deep within her cocoon, Tina's eyes shimmer with sadness as she reflects on her past desires. She begins to speak softly, recalling the many days she spent working inside the lonely castle. A vision of her younger self appears, gazing out a stone window at distant ships sailing by. She confesses that she had always dreamed of boarding one to travel to a faraway land. Ryuji listens intently to her story while his companion suggests that more opportunities will surely come. The two friends stand together in silence, looking down at the girl who remains tucked away. Tina suddenly bursts out from under the blanket with a look of renewed determination. Beaming with a grateful smile, she thanks her friends for their kind encouragement. She offers a quick apology for the gloomy atmosphere she created earlier that evening. Ryuji watches from the foreground as his companions continue their discussion at the table. A quiet night settles over the coastal town under the light of a crescent moon. Tina lies awake in her bed, still restless and preoccupied with thoughts of sailing. Meanwhile, Ryuji sits alone in the dim light and reflects while sipping his drink. The silence is shattered when the magical refrigerator creature begins to roar and growl. Ryuji yells at the box-like entity to wake up and stop its deafening noise. The creature grumbles in response, claiming that its loud nature is simply unavoidable. Ryuji stares down at a tray of fish while questioning the creature's strange behavior. The refrigerator suddenly extends a long tongue to snatch a fish from the plate. Later that night, Ryuji heads out toward the water with a fishing rod in hand. The morning sun eventually rises over the quiet buildings of the harbor town. Tina bursts into the room with a wide-eyed expression to share a major update. Her excitement falters when she sees Ryuji looking incredibly haggard and sleep-deprived. Ryuji complains about his exhaustion while Tina scolds him for staying up too late. Ryuji puts on his glasses while Tina prepares to share her important discovery. She joyfully reveals that the sea monster washed ashore, clearing the path for ships. Ryuji welcomes the lucky turn of events and suggests they eat before departing. The group gathers around the massive carcass of the sea monster lying limp upon the shore. Ryuji asks Tina to purify a fresh specimen while he prepares his cooking tools. A companion notices peculiar footprints leading away from the giant creature's resting place on the beach. Wielding a sharp knife, the chef enthusiastically declares his intention to harvest the monster's meat. He shouts out a call to begin the culinary preparation while his companions cheer behind him. A pan sizzles on the stove as minced garlic, onions, and anchovies fry in olive oil. Thick tomato sauce pours from a can to join the freshly sliced monster tentacles in the pan. Ryuji carefully adds a splash of fish sauce and watches the savory mixture simmer. A banner announces the completion of a glistening plate of tentacle sauce butter pilaf. The first step of the recipe involves finely mincing the aromatic base ingredients on a board. The sea monster is then cleaned and processed into distinct parts for the meal. The aromatic vegetables are sautéed until fragrant before the rich innards are added to the pan. Seasonings and spirits are incorporated into the sauce to develop a complex and savory flavor profile. In a separate skillet, rice is fried with butter and seasoned with salt and pepper. The meal is finally assembled by topping the butter rice with the cheese-infused seafood sauce. Everyone eagerly digs in and takes their first delicious bite of the unique transformation. Tina experiences a burst of culinary bliss as the rich flavors of the sea monster overwhelm her. The companions discuss the perfect pairing of the ingredients while Ryuji enjoys a glass of wine. With their bellies full and the path cleared, the ship finally departs from the harbor. The vessel cuts through the bright blue waves as the journey continues across the open sea. Seagulls circle above the ship while Tina joyfully spreads her arms on the sunlit deck. She calls out to Ryuji and Shiori to appreciate the refreshing ocean breeze. Ryuji offers a confident smirk as he takes in the peaceful atmosphere of the journey. A companion observes him closely from behind while he paces across the wooden planks. His attention shifts to a dark stain on the floor, which he identifies as squid ink. Shiori confronts the chef directly about his role in defeating the massive sea monster. He tries to act casual by claiming he knows nothing about the creature's defeat. The detective-minded woman refuses to back down while boasting about her sharp deductive reasoning. Ryuji breaks into a nervous sweat as she narrows her eyes at him with suspicion. He awkwardly explains that he was formerly a shut-in before starting his maritime travels. Watching a bird fly past, he tries to maintain his composure during the interrogation. Tina remains in high spirits nearby while declaring how wonderful it is to be at sea. Shiori stares at the chef with a flat expression as she processes his questionable explanation. She gives a slight knowing smile while admitting that his story might be plausible. The two share a brief moment of quiet tension amidst the sounds of the ocean. Shiori suddenly explodes in frustration because he still hasn't given her a straight answer. Later, the group walks along a coastal path while discussing their lack of travel funds. Ryuji asks about their previous rewards only to learn that someone spent the money. The conversation turns to the missing curry funds, which were apparently squandered on expensive alcohol. Shiori's eye sparkles with a keen detective's glint as her intuition points to the truth. Ryuji points an accusing finger as he dramatically identifies the culprit behind their missing funds. They visit a local guild office where a bespectacled clerk looks up from his ledgers. The group listens intently as the receptionist describes a legendary garlic farmer in the village. Shiori explains that this specific ingredient is reserved only for royalty and high-ranking nobles. Ryuji strokes his chin with a grin while expressing deep interest in such a high-grade ingredient. Arriving at the outskirts of the village, Tina shouts in amazement at the vast green fields. The chef agrees that the lush crops are truly impressive as they approach the farmhouse. They meet a veteran farmer named Manov and his assistant to discuss the specialized harvest. Ruji offers a firm handshake while confirming he is speaking to the master garlic grower. He asks for permission to pull a sample from the earth to test its quality. Crouching low in the dirt, the chef carefully selects a plant to inspect up close. With a steady tug, he reveals a perfectly formed white bulb emerging from the soil. He holds the massive garlic aloft and marvels at how much larger it is than Earth's varieties. Ruji demonstrates his expertise by measuring the stem to determine the exact peak of ripeness. The old farmer narrows his eyes in quiet admiration of the young man's keen agricultural eye. The locals admit they are surprised by his deep knowledge of their specialized crops. He proudly identifies himself as a top-class culinary researcher who specializes in garlic-heavy dishes. He begins explaining a recipe by first slicing radishes and preparing them for a quick steaming. The process continues with frying thin garlic slices in olive oil to create golden aromatic chips. Finally, the radishes are seared and simmered with butter and sauce to create a savory masterpiece. The finalized radish dish is presented with golden garlic chips, causing Tina's eyes to sparkle with delight. A new recipe is introduced for creating the ultimate version of garlic toast. The process begins by slicing fresh garlic and frying it in a pan with olive oil. The cooked slices are then combined in a bowl with raw, minced garlic and a block of butter. The leftover aromatic olive oil is poured into the mixture, along with a pinch of seasoning. After spreading the paste on baguettes and toasting them, Tina becomes overwhelmed by the delicious scent. Her mouth waters uncontrollably as she stares at the gourmet snacks with pure longing. Ruji eagerly proposes they begin preparing even more garlic-centric meals for everyone to enjoy. The assistant farmer quickly objects while reminding them that these crops are strictly for the royal family. He expresses his frustration over the constant threat posed by a local pest known as the garlic monkey. Nearby, a simple scarecrow stands guard over the fields while birds circle in the sky above. The group discovers a patch of land that has been completely torn apart by the gluttonous creature. Ruji crouches down to inspect the ruined soil and wonders about the nature of this monster. The loyal assistant reassures Manav that he will do everything in his power to protect the harvest. The chef remains silent as he deeply contemplates the challenge of dealing with the garlic-loving thief. Tina puts on a straw hat and joins the fieldwork to help with the daily chores. The assistant continues his attentive service by pouring a cup of tea for the veteran farmer. High above on a rocky outcrop, their small companion takes a peaceful nap in the sun. Ruji carries a heavy load of harvested greens while discussing the difficulties of farm life. The assistant declares that serving such a legendary farmer is the greatest honor of his life. Cricket explains that he views Manov as his own grandfather and cares for him deeply. Ruji observes the assistant from a distance with a contemplative look in his eyes. The chef carries a bundle of fresh garlic across the field while speaking with the young worker. He heads toward the storage hut while the rest of the crew continues their morning labors. Stepping inside the round building, Ruji marvels at the quality of the drying garlic bulbs. The chef reaches out to touch the harvest while questioning the veteran farmer about his assistant. Ruji asks specifically when Cricket first arrived to begin working on this royal plantation. Manov looks off to the side and recalls that it has been roughly 6 months. A heavy silence falls over the elder as he begins to reflect on a painful memory. He gazes at the wedding ring on his finger while mentioning his late wife's passing. A vision of the past shows the couple working happily in the fields during their youth. The memory shifts to Manov mourning at a grave and losing all motivation to farm. Just as he was at his lowest point, Cricket arrived from a neighboring village to visit. The young man peered through the window and urged the grieving farmer to return to his work. Manov admits his immense gratitude for the kindness that brought him back from the brink. Ruji prepares to offer his own thoughts on the matter before a sudden noise interrupts. A piercing scream echoes through the storage room and causes the chef to jump in surprise. Tina cries out Cricket's name in a state of absolute panic from the nearby fields. The group finds the assistant lying unconscious on the ground after an attack by the garlic monkey. Everyone rushes to the scene as the massive beast prepares to defend its stolen prize. The garlic monkey looms over its victim while Tina cries out that Cricket has been attacked. Ignoring the intruders as it growls and focuses on the pile of harvested garlic, the beast greedily scoops up several bulbs with its large, hairy hands. It immediately stuffs the raw garlic into its mouth and begins chewing aggressively. Ruji watches the gluttonous display from a distance while noticing the fallen worker on the ground. The chef turns toward his companions with a look of firm resolve on his face. He charges forward while brandishing his frying pan, despite the warnings shouted by his friends. The monkey responds to the approach by letting out a deafening and powerful roar. Shiori explains that the creature uses its breath to generate a massive physical shockwave. The force of the blast knocks Ryuji backward and sends his weapon spinning into the sky. A horrific stench of concentrated garlic accompanies the wind and overwhelms the chef's senses. Unable to withstand the foul odor, Ryuji collapses face first into the dirt. The monster performs a taunting dance over the defeated humans, while Shiori identifies its weak point. It turns around and mockingly slaps its own backside to provoke the remaining onlookers. High above the battlefield, the discarded frying pan reaches the peak of its trajectory. Shiori gazes upward as she notices the heavy metal object beginning its rapid descent. Gravity takes hold and pulls the cookware straight down with increasing speed. The monkey remains completely oblivious to the danger while continuing its disrespectful display. The falling pan strikes the beast squarely on its exposed bottom with a resounding thud. The garlic monkey crumples to the earth in total defeat as the group stares in shock. Ryuji slowly wakes up and lets out a faint groan of discomfort, finding himself sitting inside a quiet hut as the elderly farm owner tends a fire. He notices that Cricket is lying nearby with a large bandage wrapped around his head. A look of deep suspicion crosses the chef's face as he contemplates recent events. Leaning in closer, he tells the old man that they need to have a serious talk. The farm owner stares back with a piercing gaze that suggests he knows more than he says. Silence settles over the room, while the elderly man waits for Ryuji to continue his thought. Ryuji remembers Shiori and Tina examining the site where the garlic monkey caused its havoc. He recalls asking Shiori about the possibility of selling the harvested garlic for a high price. The merchant woman explains that rare food items are highly sought after by wealthy buyers. She emphasizes that royal-grade ingredients can be traded like precious jewels on the black market. Ryuji asserts his belief that Cricket has been using the monster attacks as a cover for theft. The injured man continues to rest silently while the chef lays out his theory to the owner. Cricket suddenly reacts with visible shock as he overhears the conversation from his bed. The old man adjusts his hat while maintaining a calm and stoic demeanor during the accusation. He surprises Ryuji by admitting that everything the chef imagined about the theft is completely true. Stunned by the admission, Ryuji shouts in surprise that the owner was already aware of the situation. The chef questions why the man never took action to kick the thief off his land. Nearby, Cricket hides behind a wall and listens to the two men discuss his secret motives. He watches with a cold and calculating gaze, while thinking only of the money he can make. The owner explains he tolerated the theft because he needed someone nearby to keep his heart steady. He instructs Ryuji to let Cricket keep the garlic while he accepts any consequences for the loss. Ryuji watches a kettle boil as he asks if the man is truly comfortable with that arrangement. Pulling his hat down, the man admits he is tired of living and seeing human frailty. He sits across from the chef and announces his plan to finally close down the farm. Cricket listens from the shadows with sweat on his face as he hears the old man's confession. Several bundles of garlic bulbs hang from the rafters as the weight of the conversation settles over them. The thief frantically stuffs the stolen harvest into a large sack to prepare for a quick escape. He grips the garlic tightly while replaying the owner's defense of his actions in his head. A grim look crosses his face as he decides to leave despite the man's kindness. He finishes gathering the stolen harvest and prepares to sneak away into the quiet of the night. Pushing the door open, the thief steps outside with a massive pack strapped to his back. Ryuji stands waiting near the entrance and calls out to the man to stop him. Cricket collapses onto the ground in fear and begins apologizing profusely for his betrayal. Holding out a small bottle of salt, the chef tells him it has immense value. He stares down with a stern gaze and warns the thief never to show his face again. The man looks at the offered salt with a mixture of confusion and desperate hope. Ryuji shouts at him to leave at once, sending the thief running away in a panic. He watches in silence as the man disappears into the horizon toward the distant rock towers. The chef lets out a sharp click of his tongue as the thief finally vanishes from sight. Ryuji stares off into the distance, reflecting on how simple life should be. He turns his attention to the kitchen where various cooking tools hang ready for use. With practiced precision, the chef begins finely mincing cloves of garlic on a wooden board. His friends suddenly arrive at the kitchen with the elderly farm owner in tow. While Ryuji works at the stove, his companion asks why the thief wasn't invited. Continuing his steady chopping, he explains that the man has already departed on a journey. The young woman listens with a skeptical expression while the old farmer waits nearby. He starts the dish by tossing the fresh garlic into a pan of shimmering oil. As a fragrant steam rises, the duo leans in to appreciate the savory aroma. The chef carefully adds water and seasonings before stirring the liquid into a whirlpool. A steaming bowl of salt garlic soup is finally presented as the finished masterpiece. The first step of the recipe involves sautéing the garlic bits until they are fragrant. Water, ham, and a variety of seasonings are then combined and brought to a boil. He demonstrates how to swirl the broth while slowly pouring in the beaten egg. The final touch includes adding the rest of the egg and a garnish of green onions. Ruji serves a bowl to the old man while assuring him it didn't come from his farm. The farmer tentatively lifts a spoonful of the hot, clear broth toward his face. He takes a careful sip as the heat and flavor of the soup hit his tongue. A moment of silence follows as the man processes the complex taste of the meal. Eyes widening in surprise, the elderly owner breathes out a word of genuine delight. Ruji checks if the old man has regained his strength as he presents another tray of soup. He mentions that the farm cannot be maintained under current conditions. Pumping his fist, the chef vows to return and revolutionize the local cuisine with harvested garlic. The elderly farmer remains silent while processing the young man's bold declaration. Suddenly, the young woman's stomach lets out a thunderous rumble in the quiet room. She begs for a taste as Ruji raises his pan to prepare a full garlic course. A small, satisfied smirk plays across the weathered face of the old man. He muses over the boy's talk of dismantling traditional food customs. The entire group eventually gathers around a table laden with an array of garlic dishes. A warm memory of a smiling woman flickers through the old man's mind. Outside, the sun shines brightly over the peaceful farmhouse and its peculiar scarecrow. The journey resumes as the travelers reach a wooden signpost at a fork in the road. Pointing toward the horizon, the companion explains that the town of Lubaka lies just ahead. Ruji pauses to ask Shiori about her own destination and future plans. She looks away while mentioning a personal mission involving a nearby dungeon. The group decides to stick together for another dungeon exploration venture. Ruji mentions that lizard meat tastes exactly like chicken to the delight of his friend. Waving her arm, the blonde woman urges Shiori to keep up with their pace. A soft, rare smile touches Shiori's lips as she watches her companions. The bright blue sky stretches infinitely above as they set off toward their next challenge. The group arrives at a bustling dungeon entrance, where numerous adventurers have gathered in a lively crowd. Staring in disbelief, the blonde woman wonders why so many people are congregating for a guild request. Nearby, two seated warriors casually enjoy sticks of grilled meat by a small campfire. Ruji points toward the pair while questioning if their meal violates the strict local food laws. A diagram appears to illustrate how adventurer ranks directly determine the quality and quantity of provided rations. Shiori explains that high-ranking members benefit from a system that relaxes food restrictions for themselves and their kin. A sudden shout rings out announcing the arrival of a renowned party known as the Silver Wings. Three elite figures walk forward with confidence, drawing the immediate attention of everyone present. The magic user Lila and the guardian warrior Garun are formally introduced as core members of the group. Leading the trio is the swordsman Ark, who carries himself with an air of calm authority. Lesser adventurers whisper amongst themselves about the overwhelming presence of such a high-ranked team. The blonde companion asks about their fame, while Shiori notes they are currently a very popular party. Trailing behind the elites, a lone porter gasps for air under the weight of an enormous backpack. His foot suddenly slips on the uneven ground as his strength begins to fail him. With a heavy thud, the porter collapses face first into the dirt while his cargo spills forward. Rushing to his side, the blonde woman asks if he is injured after the nasty fall. The porter named Kashigi struggles to regain his footing as his massive pack looms over him. One of the elite members looks back and harshly berates the porter for his perceived incompetence. Shiori stares at the scene in silence, her expression turning uncharacteristically grim and serious. Sensing the tension, her companion asks Shiori what is troubling her as they watch the group depart. Responding to her companion's concern, Shiori looks away with a troubled gaze and insists nothing is wrong. Moving past the tension, Ruji cheerfully decides to prepare some portable rations for their upcoming dungeon dive. He begins the process by carefully mixing warm rice with torn bits of ham and seasonings. Approaching a nearby campfire, Ruji asks the resting warriors for permission to use their heat source. As cheese melts into a sizzling pool on the pan, he presses the rice balls firmly onto it. The culinary creation is soon complete. unveiling a set of shimmering raw ham and cheese onigiri. A quick guide details mixing the rice with salt, consomme, black pepper, and olive oil in a bowl. The next instruction shows the rice being shaped into balls, while cheese portions are heated in a pan. Once the cheese begins to melt and turn crispy, the rice balls are flipped to sear both sides. The final step involves placing the crispy rice onto seaweed and finishing with parsley and olive oil. Holding up one of the savory treats, the blonde companion prepares to take an enthusiastic first bite. She and her small animal friend immediately dive in, savoring the richness of the toasted cheese. Overwhelmed by the incredible flavor, the woman shouts in pure delight as the taste fills her senses. Ruji watches her eat while reminding her that these were meant to be saved for the journey. Suddenly, a mysterious figure approaches their small group as they finish their snack in the clearing. The newcomer is revealed to be a hooded man who carries a gentle and polite smile. Though Ryuji offers him a portion of their meal, the man humbly declines the offer of food. Switching the topic, the stranger asks if they would be interested in venturing into the dungeon together. Gesturing toward the looming stone entrance, he explains that a joint effort is far more efficient for navigation. Ryuji and his companion quickly agree to the proposal, welcoming the extra support for the challenge ahead. The hooded man addresses the crowd, inviting everyone to join their party for the expedition. He raises his hands high, loudly promising a fair share of any loot and treasure found. Nearby adventurers exchange excited glances, feeling lucky about the opportunity to increase their ranks. As the sun begins to set, the large group follows Ryuji and the others into the dark entrance. One of the companions looks forward with a steady gaze, mentally preparing for the challenges ahead. Inside the dungeon, a solitary candle flickers on the stone wall, casting long shadows across the path. The hooded man leads the way with a subtle grin, walking alongside his original battle-hardened teammates. He wears a look of hidden malice, his eyes narrowing as he considers his secret intentions. Quietly, he mentions to his comrade that the target possesses a vast supply of valuable seasonings. The porter following them breaks into a nervous sweat, clearly unsettled by the group's hushed conversation. The woman in the lead group wonders why they bothered inviting so many extra people along. The hooded man explains that having a larger group makes an unfortunate accident look far more natural. As they move deeper, a heavy boot crunches down near a pile of old skulls and bones. He suggests that a total massacre would easily be blamed on the dungeon's indigenous monsters. While Ryuji and Tina talk cheerfully, the sinister intentions of their guides remain completely hidden from them. The expanded party marches down a long, arched corridor lit by rhythmic intervals of candlelight. One of the weaker adventurers voices his anxiety about the high-level monsters rumored to dwell here. The hooded leader offers a reassuring smile, promising the newcomers that his team will keep them safe. They continue their steady pace across the cracked stone floor, passing more remains of previous explorers. Without warning, massive predatory spiders drop from the shadows above, trapping a horrified warrior in their reach. The hooded man shouts a warning as the massive spiders drop from the dark ceiling. Ryuji quickly commands the others to stay back while he moves into a defensive position. He swings his heavy frying pan with incredible force and speed against the attackers. The hooded leader and his companions watch the display of power with wide-eyed shock. Ryuji's powerful strike sends the giant spiders tumbling across the cold dungeon floor. The creatures crash into the stone walls with a resounding thud, completely defeated. Tina joins the fight, using her own cooking tools to expertly strike the remaining monsters. Together, they continue their relentless assault, overwhelming the spiders with coordinated movements. The pair stands victorious amidst the incapacitated monsters, while their guides look on in disbelief. A notification message appears in the air, confirming the total defeat of the enemy pack. Tina strikes a proud pose, boasting about her speed and strength to the astonished onlookers. The hooded man and his comrade realize they must immediately reconsider their original plan. Ryuji examines the spider remains but concludes that they are definitely not fit for consumption. The leader turns to the nervous porter and addresses him with a fake, friendly smile. He leans in closer to the man, mentioning that he has a specific favor to ask. The group continues walking through the dungeon, emerging into a vast, circular stone chamber. Tina's eyes widen in amazement as she takes in the sheer scale of the room. The massive central arena is surrounded by multiple tiers of arched entryways leading elsewhere. She asks which way they should go, while the guide notes their target is nearby. The leader suggests splitting up the party to search the various corridors more efficiently. Ruji and the guides discuss which route to take through the many arched entryways. The dark-haired woman adjusts her mask and claims to know the way. She activates her unique skill, summoning a glowing hawk that streaks forward into the darkness. Her eyes sharpen as she focuses her magical sight through the spiritual bird. Lyra confidently points towards a specific tunnel, announcing their route to the group. Ruji decides to follow her lead as they venture into the dim tunnels. A single candle burns steadily against the stone wall of the narrow corridor. The party moves deep into the shadows of the silent, brick-lined hallway. Ruji narrows his eyes as he begins to suspect the porter of hiding something. He looks back at the nervous man while continuing to walk through the hall. Tina explains that their guide specifically requested the porter's assistance for the journey. The porter breaks out in a nervous sweat as he recalls a secret conversation. In his memory, the leader instructs him to poison the group's meals. The man listens in shock as he is offered a reward for his betrayal. He is shown a vial of toxin and promised a better life for his family. The porter eventually agrees to the dark task with a heavy heart. Returning to the present, he tries to maintain his cover by making excuses. He bows his head and apologizes profusely for any trouble he might cause. Tina looks at him with a mixture of suspicion and growing annoyance. She yells at the man for apologizing when he hasn't even done anything wrong yet. Ruji and Tina whisper about their guide's bad mood behind her back. Ruji decides they should take a short tea break to recover. The group enters Ruji's magical kitchen space through a dark, swirling portal. The porter is shocked to see such high-level spatial magic used for a kitchen. Ruji hands an apple to Tina and asks her to slice it for everyone. The porter offers to help with the preparation and grabs a towel. Tina watches in surprise as the man begins skillfully peeling the fruit. A plate of expertly carved apple rabbits is presented with a sparkle. Tina's eyes shine with admiration while the man explains he practiced for his children. Ruji and Tina warmly praise the porter for his impressive craftsmanship. The man laughs awkwardly and wipes sweat from his face in a state of conflict. His eye twitches as he is struck by a sudden wave of panic. He looks away in shame, unable to meet the others' friendly gazes. A single apple rabbit remains on the table amidst the growing tension. Ruji checks the boiling kettle and tells the group to wait a moment. He starts pouring a drink as Tina watches him with a neutral expression. The porter discreetly holds the poison vial while glancing at the teapot. He remembers a past moment when he was berated for his cooking style. He steels himself while a drop of sweat falls from his brow. The man recalls serving simple meals to his children in their modest home. The porter closes his eyes tightly while grappling with a dark decision. A single bead of sweat drips down his temple as he prepares to act. His fingers shake while tilting the vial over the group's snack. Far away, a rival party approaches the towering doors of a dungeon room. The ruthless group talks about catching up and killing the other adventurers. Their leader uses his immense strength to force the heavy stone doors open. The intruders stop in their tracks when they see the unexpected scene inside. A chef stands composed in the middle of a room filled with defeated monsters. Back in the magical kitchen, the porter gazes at the flask with hesitation. He holds the poison directly above the expertly carved fruit rabbits. His eye twitches from the immense pressure of the task he was given. A television screen displays a dramatic encounter between lovers on a pier. The woman's face is shown in a close-up as she speaks her lines. A man corners the woman against a wall in a classic romantic trope. Ryuji and his companions sit at the table watching the soap opera together. Ryuji realizes someone subscribed to a new streaming service without asking him. The sound of a vial smashing against the floor interrupts the peaceful break. The porter throws himself onto the ground and begs for forgiveness. Tina and Ryuji stare in confusion at the man's sudden display of guilt. He finally reveals the secret plan to murder them for their food and seasonings. Tina reacts with pure shock while Ryuji and the others listen to the porter's confession. The porter remains bowed on the ground, admitting he was ordered to poison them all. Tina leans in closer to the man as Ryuji watches the scene from the dinner table. He explains how he was promised a lizard's tail in exchange for their lives. Shiori listens intently while the man describes his desperate desire to feed his family. His voice cracks as he admits he simply couldn't bring himself to kill them. He recalls the painful morning he left his sleeping child behind to find work. His wife stood at the doorway of their humble home to see him off. Her gentle face remains a constant reminder for him to be an honorable man. Back in the present, he keeps his head pressed to the floor in deep shame. A hand reaches out to pat Shiori's head as the tension in the room peaks. She suddenly stands up from the table, surprising Ryuji with her abrupt and silent departure. She dashes across the kitchen toward the door, while the sentient refrigerator watches her. The appliance shoots its long tongue out to intercept her and block her path. She shouts for it to stay out of her way while struggling against its reach. The refrigerator's face contorts as it insists on hearing what she has to say. She retaliates by burning its tongue with a magical lens, causing the appliance to scream. Tina cries out Shiori's name as the girl disappears into a swirling black portal. The soap opera on the screen reaches a climax with the lovers embracing each other. Several candles flicker and drip wax on a stone wall as the light fades. A mysterious profile marks the weight of the silence settling over the group. Tina quickly follows Shiori into a candlelit hall, calling out for her to wait. Shiori turns back with a sharp gaze, insisting that she be left entirely alone. Refusing to back down, Tina declares that she will never abandon a dear friend. The girl stops her retreat to confess that the porter's story mirrors her own past. Tina listens in shock as Shiori begins to speak about her deceased father. She envisions a gentle man with glasses who was always bowing and apologizing to everyone. Though he lacked any magic, he risked his life as an adventurer to feed his children. Her eyes fill with a bitter sorrow while remembering his tragic end at a monster's hands. She squeezes her fist tight, cursing the father who left her behind for a foolish dream. From the darkness of the corridor, Ryuji and the others witness the emotional confrontation. The porter remains frozen in place, his face covered in a nervous, guilty sweat. Tina suggests that being together is far more important than any treasure found in a dungeon. A boot taps softly against the cold stone as the heavy atmosphere starts to shift. The maid asks if Shiori can finally see the porter's desperation through her father's eyes. She smiles warmly, explaining that providing a good meal is the ultimate act of love. Shiori looks up with wide eyes as the anger in her heart begins to dissipate. She stares into the distance, her expression turning from resentment to deep, quiet reflection. A final memory appears of her father's large hand patting her head with clumsy affection. She recalls her youthful frustration and the warmth of a bond she never truly lost. Ryuji's eyes widen as he senses a sudden disturbance further down the dungeon hall. A deafening roar echoes through the stone corridor, startling the entire party at once. The group peers down the dark passage, trying to locate the source of the commotion. While the porter trembles with fear, Tina and the others realize something terrible has occurred. Without a second thought, Ryuji sprints toward the noise to investigate the potential danger. He bursts into a large chamber, only to find a scene of total devastation. A battered adventurer leans against a wall, coughing up blood while gasping for air. Ryuji stares at the carnage, unable to comprehend the scale of the defeat before him. In the center of the room stands a tall man dressed in a chef's uniform. The young cook is stunned to see someone else wearing professional attire in this dungeon. Stepping forward, he demands to know if this stranger is responsible for the fallen adventurers. The mysterious man casually adjusts his hat, claiming his actions were purely self-defense. He waves away the gravity of the situation with a cold and condescending attitude. A memory of his brutal efficiency flashes by as he recalls striking down the warriors. The porter watches from the doorway, horrified that an elite team was so easily crushed. The stranger scoffs at the mention of their rank with a mocking glint in his eyes. He sighs, complaining that the guild's current standards for adventurers are far too lenient. Gesturing toward the fallen, he asks if Ryuji intends to seek vengeance for his fallen peers. Ryuji quickly clarifies that they aren't friends and actually find that group quite troublesome. He stands firm, declaring that their only goal here is to hunt the monsters ahead. The chef stranger holds up a severed monster claw, asking Ryuji if this is the prize he seeks. Tossing the heavy limb onto the ground, he notices Ryuji's apparent lack of enthusiasm for the trade. Nearby, Tina places a comforting hand on the shoulder of the traumatized and battered adventurer. Observing the woman's poor condition, Ryuji decides it is best for everyone to exit the dungeon immediately. Suddenly, the stranger reaches out and grabs Tina, pulling her back and startling the entire group. His eyes fixate on the pendant around her neck, recognizing the distinct dragon insignia engraved upon the stone. As Ryuji prepares to depart with his haul, the stranger's voice booms across the chamber, ordering him to halt. The mysterious chef's expression darkens as he realizes the magnitude of what he has just discovered. He brandishes a set of sharp culinary tools, labeling the group as villains who must be detained. Ryuji and his companions stare back in shock, unable to comprehend this sudden and aggressive turn of events. The man strikes a dramatic pose, declaring that they must now answer for a grave and unforgivable sin. Ryuji shouts out in confusion, demanding an explanation for these wild accusations of criminal activity. Pointing directly at Tina's chest, the stranger accuses her of being a thief who stole a sacred treasure. Tina frantically defends herself, explaining that the necklace is a precious memento passed down from her mother. Ignoring her plea, the stranger moves with blurring speed to seize the pendant by force. He dangles the dragon-marked jewel before his eyes, insisting that a thorough investigation of the item is necessary. Gasping in disbelief, Tina realizes that her cherished necklace has been snatched from her neck in an instant. Ryuji lunges forward with a fierce expression, swinging his heavy frying pan to protect his friend. The stranger stands his ground, unfazed by the counterattack as Tina cowers in the background. He readies his bladed forks, bracing himself for a high-stakes duel against the young chef. The stranger chef unleashes a flurry of sharp knives that streak through the air toward Ryuji. Ryuji raises his trusty frying pan to deflect the barrage, the utensils clanging loudly against the metal. Teeth clenched in frustration, the young chef struggles to maintain his defense against the relentless onslaught. Ryuji commands his friends to escape immediately while he stays behind to reclaim the stolen pendant. Meanwhile, the mysterious man inspects the dragon jewel, murmuring to himself that it is indeed the genuine article. The two chefs lock eyes in a tense standoff, their faces inches apart as they gauge each other's strength. Raising a fist in triumph, the stranger flaunts the snatched treasure while preparing for the next exchange. Shadow and light play across their determined expressions as the duel reaches a boiling point. Ryuji launches a powerful spinning kick, forcing the opponent to retreat slightly from the impact. Landing in a low, ready stance, the boy glares at his adversary who brandishes his fork and knives. Tina and her companions realize they must make a move while Ryuji keeps the enemy busy. The group begins to retreat, urging one another to move faster as the sounds of battle echo. Kneeling beside the injured adventurer, the male companion helps her to her feet to join the escape. The woman pauses for a moment, her eyes reflecting a mix of guilt and reluctant gratitude for their help. Calling them fools for their kindness, she nevertheless begins to run alongside the others to find safety. Tina and the man support the wounded woman as they flee deeper into the dungeon corridors. Ryuji lets out a thunderous roar, charging forward with a culinary knife to strike a decisive blow. The two warriors collide in a massive explosion of force that shatters the stone floor beneath them. Straining against the stranger's overwhelming power, Ryuji pours every ounce of his will into the struggle. However, the mysterious chef calmly stops the incoming blade, using only 2 fingers with effortless precision. The stranger chef lands a heavy physical blow that sends Ryuji flying backward through the air. After a brief tumble, Ryuji skillfully recovers and plants his feet firmly on the shattered ground. The antagonist narrows his gaze, carefully studying the young chef's reactions and battle readiness. Ryuji grits his teeth and breaks into a cold sweat upon realizing his opponent's true power. A tense atmosphere hangs over the arena as the two fighters square off once more. The stranger breaks the silence by correctly deducing that Ryuji is a chef from Earth. He calmly stoops down to retrieve his fallen chef's hat from the cracked stone floor. Adjusting the tall headwear, he reveals that he also shares a common origin from Earth. Ryuji looks on with a stunned expression, his mouth hanging open in complete shock at the revelation. The conversation turns toward a certain demon elder, leaving Ryuji confused and deeply curious about the connection. A memory surfaces of a grand carriage traveling along a rugged mountain pass. Albert stands by the roadside as the ornate vehicle comes to a noisy halt. A refined man with long hair looks out from the window to engage in conversation. He mentions a trivial treasure hunt while sipping from a cup with a cold gaze. Returning to the present, Albert turns his focus toward Tina, who is watching from the sidelines. With a serious and demanding tone, the master chef asks for the young maid's name. Tina hesitates for a moment before introducing herself with a mix of fear and confusion. Albert peers intently at her face, searching for a specific likeness in her youthful features. He closes his eyes and remarks that she shares a striking resemblance to Lady Eris. Tina's face pales as she asks the stranger how he could possibly know her mother's name. Albert closes his eyes and holds up a hand, signaling that their confrontation is over for today. Ryuji stands his ground and demands to know if they are no longer being treated as criminals. Waving a hand dismissively, Albert explains that his attitude changed upon recognizing a fellow chef from Earth. Tina gazes down at the Dragon King stone in her open palm with a look of utter disbelief. Albert raises a single finger and offers to share one specific detail regarding the mysterious artifact. A close-up reveals the intricate dragon carving on the stone as he speaks of its hidden power. Bystanders in the arena exchange skeptical glances while discussing the ancient legends of extinct dragons. Ryuji folds his arms and sighs in disappointment upon learning he cannot cook a legendary dragon. Albert effortlessly heaves a massive reptilian carcass onto his shoulder to prepare for his departure. Brandishing a small scalpel, he points toward a wall carving and mentions the stone as a dragon's legacy. Tina desperately reaches out toward the departing chef and begs him to answer more of her questions. Looking back with a cold gaze, Albert explains that his master is extremely impatient regarding time. He begins to retreat into a dark, swirling vortex while carrying his heavy load with ease. A brilliant burst of light flashes in the middle of the arena as the gateway snaps shut. Tina remains rooted to the spot in a stunned silence as she processes the man's departure. The girl from the sidelines approaches and asks how that strange man could have known about her. Tina stares ahead with wide, trembling eyes as she questions the true nature of her own identity. She grips the cord of her necklace tightly, pulling it against her chest in a moment of anxiety. Ryuji watches his companion from afar as she struggles with the weight of the chef's words. Tina tilts her head down until her eyes are hidden in shadow, lost in a sea of troubled thoughts. Ryuji pats Tina's head while dismissively describing her as just a gluttonous maid to the others. Tina reacts with comedic fury as Ryuji continues to joke about her being a runaway. The rival chef ponders the strange connection between a chef from Earth and dragon powers. Storm clouds loom ominously over the spires and walls of the massive royal capital. A silent figure pushes a cart through the vast, empty corridors of the castle interior. The mustachioed man moves past decorative greenery while reflecting on the existence of a seventh stone. Sudden rain lashes against the windows, soaking the plants on the stone ledge outside. A dark smirk spreads across the chef's face as he anticipates an approaching storm. He stands before the towering, ornate doors of the palace while preparing to enter. Back in the woods, Ryuji remains skeptical as he looks back at the group of forest dwellers. A bound woman yells in protest against her capture while accusing Kashigi of betrayal. The hooded captive begs for release, asking Kashigi to show some mercy toward them. A stern gaze fixes on the prisoner as he is reminded of a debt he hasn't forgotten. Kashigi looks visibly nervous while being scolded for his lack of talent and previous failures. A polished frying pan hurtles through the air, nearly striking the captive in the face. The girl stands firm and warns the group that they would be dead without help. Kashigi hunches over under the weight of a massive load he carries on his back. One of the bound men grits his teeth in silent frustration over their current predicament. Ryuji discusses the fate of the prisoners, while a small owl watches from a branch. Tina excitedly interrupts the conversation to announce that it is finally time for their reward. Ryuji points back toward their camp, while declaring his intent to cook the lizard meat. Tina reacts with shock when Ryuji announces he will prepare 2 different dishes for them. Overflowing with joy, Tina makes double peace signs while crying tears of absolute happiness. Kashigi asks if he can also receive a portion while Tina continues her enthusiastic celebration. Ryuji examines the massive lizard tail that Kashigi has brought back for the meal. Tina cheers with a raised fist to celebrate their victory and the rewards they gathered. Ryuji instructs Tina to purify the meat while she complains about being treated like an appliance. The cooking begins as the meat is marinated in white dashi, garlic, and ginger. A mixture of flour and carbonated water is added to create a perfectly crispy batter. The coated lizard pieces sizzle loudly as they are dropped into a pot of hot oil. Golden brown lizard tempura is finally plated and presented as the first delicious course. Tina immediately snatches a piece with her chopsticks before anyone else can start. She huffs and puffs while trying to eat the piping hot fried meat. A wave of intense flavor washes over Tina as she clenches her fists in delight. Her face glows with satisfaction upon realizing how incredibly soft the meat has become. Ryuji recommends adding salt and lemon while Tina continues to enjoy her snack. The chef turns his attention to the second dish and calls for Shiori's assistance. Shiori questions her involvement in the kitchen while Ryuji prepares the next set of ingredients. Kashigi holds an onion and a knife while seeking advice on the proper cutting technique. Ryuji explains how slicing against the grain improves the texture as Kashigi starts the preparation. Ryuji begins searing the sliced meat pieces, skin side down until they are perfectly brown. Shiori assists by pouring beaten egg into the pan through her chopsticks to ensure even distribution. The completed bowl of lizard rice is presented as a steaming and flavorful masterpiece. In the first step for tempura, the meat is sliced into thick and even portions. A rich marinade of dashi, sake, garlic, and ginger is massaged into the meat pieces. Salad oil is poured into a frying pan and brought to temperature over medium heat. A specialized batter is created by mixing flour, starch, and salt with cold carbonated water. The meat is coated in the batter and fried in stages to keep the oil hot. Plated with fresh lemon, the golden brown meat is ready to be served as an appetizer. Starting the next dish, onions are sliced against the grain while mitsuba is prepped. Bonito flakes are heated in the microwave and crushed into a powder for seasoning. Thigh meat is fried skin side down until the surface becomes delightfully crisp and savory. Ruji adds onions, soy sauce, and mirin to the pan before lowering the heat. The pan is covered with a lid to allow the onions to simmer until tender. A partially whisked egg is poured over the meat and simmered briefly under a lid. Another egg and fresh mitsuba stems are added before the dish is steamed once more. The final creation is served over rice and garnished with aromatic mitsuba leaves. Ruji invites a surprised Kashigi to be the very first to sample the hot meal. Kashigi takes a mouthful of the rice bowl and begins to chew with great anticipation. A look of absolute bliss fills Kashigi's face as he experiences the incredible flavor profile. An eye opens wide as if struck by a sudden and profound realization. Shori turns to her companion to ask for her thoughts on the new dish. The young woman savoring the meal describes the wonderful texture of the meat. Ruji explains the culinary tradition behind the dish, while bringing over fresh mugs. Taking another delicious bite, she notes how perfectly the ingredients all harmonize together. Kashigi sheepishly scratches the back of his head while thanking her for the praise. Ruji listens quietly as Kashigi begins to reflect on the simple joys of cooking. With a beaming smile, Kashigi describes the fulfillment of hearing someone call his food delicious. Ruji takes a long, refreshing drink from his mug while nodding in agreement. The group continues their warm conversation around a table filled with steaming plates. A sudden silence falls as the companion looks down with a solemn expression. She speaks up to address Kashigi directly with a serious and steady tone. While clutching her glass, she acknowledges his deep desire to feed his family well. Kashigi's eyes widen in absolute shock at the poignant weight of her words. A bead of sweat rolls down his face as his internal resolve starts to crumble. He envisions a peaceful future where he sits happily at a dinner table with his family. Overcome by his repressed emotions, Kashigi hangs his head as a sob escapes him. Traumatic memories of monster encounters flash through his mind during his emotional breakdown. Tears stream down his face while he confesses that he was never meant to be an adventurer. Ruji and Shori watch in stunned silence as their friend lets out a heartfelt cry. Kashigi wipes away his tears with a determined movement of his arm. Steeling his resolve, he declares his intention to finally return to his home. Shori offers a soft word of gratitude with a gentle expression on her face. A fleeting memory of a comforting hand on a child's head passes through. Back at the table, Shori kindly hands a tissue to the emotional Kashigi. Breaking the tension, she suggests adding a dash of spices to enhance the meal. Her eyes light up with a sudden spark of curiosity and joy. Turning toward Ruji, she asks a thoughtful question about their companions' futures. Kashigi describes his distant hometown as a quiet place with nothing but countryside. Shori smiles warmly while noting the similarities to her own humble beginnings. Ruji observes the bonding moment with a quiet and satisfied look. Shori begins to season her dish with a small bottle of spices. Red pepper flakes sprinkle over the food to add a new kick. She pauses for a moment as a look of deep contemplation crosses her face. Meanwhile, heavy rain falls over a grand and imposing stone castle. A servant pushes a covered food cart through a dimly lit corridor. A man with a stern face and a thick mustache waits expectantly. An extravagant banquet of exotic meats and fruits sits ready for consumption. A massive kingly figure feasts greedily while sitting atop a decorated throne. He reaches for another portion while his servants wait for his next command. A man with a thick mustache reports that the seventh holder has been located, causing a bearded elder to question why he wasn't told the child was alive. As a map reveals the ancient history of 6 nations locked in eternal combat, portraying the silhouettes of a starving populace devastated by the long-standing war, until a mysterious youth suddenly appears in the heat of a fierce battle, standing ready for combat as the legendary warrior known as Gassen, who utilizes his overwhelming power to unify the lands and establish a kingdom, ascending to the throne as the great King Gassen with eyes of steel, overlooking a world where floating islands hover high above the jagged rocky cliffs, while Ruji and his companions continue their steady march toward the royal capital, questioning the lack of teleportation magic as they trek through the quiet countryside, when suddenly a group of masked figures leaps out to ambush the group, revealing a flamboyant woman leading a parade of confetti and horn-blowing musicians, leaving the travelers standing in awkward silence amid the loud and colorful celebration, which causes the woman to pause and wonder if her greeting was too understated. prompting her to bark commands at her masked servants to dance more vigorously as they shower Ryuji and Shiori with flower garlands and exotic fruit juices, eventually inviting them to board a nearby boat for an easier trip together. Though Ryuji remains suspicious of the situation while sipping his cold drink, as the woman assures them they will reach the capital in no time. Ryuji questions the woman about their method of transportation while she smiles cryptically, kneeling down toward the small creature Perel to demonstrate her unique plan, invoking a magical spell with a single finger pointed at the confused animal, who tilts its head in bewilderment as it waits for something to happen, suddenly exploding into a massive size that towers over the astonished travelers, casting a gargantuan shadow as Ryuji and Shiori stare up at the transformation, sprouting immense black wings that unfurl with a powerful snap against the wind, becoming a legendary flying beast capable of hauling an entire boat across the sky, surprising Shiori with the sudden realization that they will be traveling by air. As Perel takes flight and carries the group high above the clouds, leaving the woman to remark that the journey will take a full day, prompting Ryuji to spin his pan and offer to prepare an in-flight meal, kicking off a culinary demonstration with an enthusiastic call to action, spreading mustard sauce and layering cheese and bacon before grilling the bread, serving the ultimate flying hot sandwich filled with gooey melted cheese, listing the precise ingredients needed to recreate the savory breakfast dish, beginning with the first step of mixing a variety of seasonings into a bowl, followed by coating the bread slices in sauce and topping them with cheddar, pan-frying strips of bacon until they are ready to be stacked on top, and finally steaming the eggs under a lid to achieve the perfect consistency, placing the cooked egg onto the bread to finalize the layers of the sandwich, dropping a piece of butter into the heated frying pan for the final toast, adding more butter to ensure the opposite side reaches a perfect golden brown, slicing the sandwich in half and finishing it with a light dusting of salt, witnessing Shiori's pure amazement as the rich yolk oozes from the warm bread, shouting her approval to the open sky while savoring the delicious results, relishing the salty bacon and melted butter that makes the dish irresistible, gliding effortlessly through the air as the winged creature carries them onward, maintaining a high altitude far above the distant clouds and floating land masses. Watching Ryuji take a refreshing drink while the flight continues smoothly, gathering around the table inside the cabin to play a friendly card game, peering out the window to announce that they have arrived at their destination, beholding the vast royal capital as it gleams under the midday sun, steering the flying beast toward the high spires of a majestic castle, touching down in a spacious courtyard where the travelers begin to exit, assuring the group that they are safe within the confines of the mansion, revealing with a stern look that an assassination plot is currently underway, prompting Shiori to gasp in disbelief upon hearing she is the one targeted, explaining that her secret identity was leaked to those who wish her harm, leaving the young companions frozen in shock at the sudden and dangerous news, explaining that the kingdom is ruled by 6 princes and a single princess, detailing how each royal member receives a special stone from King Gazan, showcasing the Dragon King stone pendant that gleams with a distinct emblem, questioning the significance of the artifact as the realization begins to dawn, declaring that Tina is actually the 7th successor to the royal throne, confirming the truth with a confident and knowing smile, struggling to process the life-changing news while trembling in place, mocking their lack of knowledge regarding the secret lineage and royal affairs, outlining the power of the stones to purify meat and summon otherworldly chefs, recognizing the name of the chef Albert who served the king previously, admitting that she initially intended to exploit Tina's hidden identity for her own gain, complaining about being treated like pawns in a larger political game, applying lipstick while ordering the group to wait patiently for her return, demanding an audience with the king to settle matters directly, proposing a discussion to abolish the strict dietary laws of the realm, noticing Tina's sudden withdrawal as she stands in silent contemplation, checking on her friend's well-being after seeing her visible distress, confessing through tears that she has no desire to meet her father, expressing a deep-seated fear of the upcoming royal reunion, wondering about the cause of her pain as the girl turns away. Tina begins to recount a painful memory from her childhood involving her mother, recalling a peaceful day in a bustling town under a clear sky, where she once walked hand in hand with her mother through the cobblestone streets, witnessing a joyful reunion between a neighboring boy and his returning father. Watching the happy family embrace while she stood silently by her mother's side, feeling a sudden pang of longing as she observed their domestic bliss. Asking her mother with innocent curiosity when her own father would finally return, noticing how her mother's grip tightened painfully around her small hand in response, standing still as other families moved forward together while they remained isolated, looking up to see a distant and sorrowful expression clouding her mother's face, explaining that she decided long ago to stop waiting for a father who vanished, snapping at her companions when they suggest his existence makes everything okay, shouting through tears about the abandonment she and her mother endured for years, recounting the horrific day monsters attacked their village and destroyed their lives, bringing up the tragic fate of her mother during the chaos of that attack, declaring firmly that she has no desire to meet the man who ignored them, falling into a heavy silence as the group absorbs the weight of her words, closing her eyes as she accepts Tina's refusal to participate in the reunion, announcing her intention to inform King Gazan of the situation alone, walking toward the grand exit to settle the royal affairs on her own terms. A woman with flowing hair calls out to a mustached chef named Albert, prompting Albert to look back with a mixture of recognition and irritation, leading her to wrap an arm around his shoulders despite his clear protests, walking together through the courtyard toward the massive arched palace doors, pausing as the heavy gates creak open to reveal the throne room, discovering a tense confrontation between King Gazan and a heavily armored warrior, observing the sacred ritual where only top-tier adventurers may challenge the king, noting the presence of Vils, a renowned five-star adventurer ready for battle, watching as the samurai demands the king arm himself for their duel, ignoring the threat as the king calmly prepares to eat his breakfast, holding up a tiny spoon as his chosen weapon for the encounter, causing Vils to grit his teeth in a fit of absolute rage, lunging forward with incredible speed to punish the king's perceived arrogance, bringing down a massive strike that shatters the very floor of the chamber, sending clouds of dust and stone flying toward the panicked onlookers, leaving the woman speechless as she watches the destruction unfold, revealing that the king has blocked the deadly blade with a simple utensil, repelling the attacker with a flick of his wrist as Vils recoils, continuing to eat his meal leisurely despite the ongoing assault, staring down the exhausted warrior who can barely catch his breath. King Gazan holds a spoon looking confident and smug, effortlessly deflecting the massive blade with the tiny utensil, while Vils reels in shock, leading him to mockingly point the cutlery at the defeated warrior's face, declaring the bout over with a stern and utterly bored expression, as Vils screams in despair while his reflection trembles in the polished metal, standing victorious among the shattered stone while the samurai collapses into the dust, revealing the extensive damage to the challenger's armor from the indirect shockwave, commanding the royal attendants to provide the fallen man with medical care and a reward, causing the woman to marvel silently at the king's monstrous and overwhelming physical prowess, realizing that his strength stems from a lifetime of consuming Earth-style magical cuisine, gazing at him with an intense mix of adoration and hunger for his dragon-like power, approaching the king with rhythmic applause to offer her shallow praise for the performance, while Gazan sips a drink and dismisses the duel as a minor inconvenience, forcing Floria to hide her internal panic at the king's terrifying ease of victory, walking together through the garden as the conversation shifts toward more urgent royal reports, explaining that Princess Tina is currently being sheltered safely within the woman's private residence, prompting a cold and calculating look from the king as he digests this crucial information, warning him that the other royal siblings are already beginning to scent the princess's trail, promising that she will personally ensure no one lays a single finger on the young princess, proposing that the king grant the girl official recognition while a bird feeds its chicks nearby. King Gazan accuses the woman of manipulating the princess to steal his throne, prompting her to stroke her chin while feigning innocence with a nervous smile, as he turns his head away, dismissing the girl as a mere illegitimate child, leaving the woman to sweat under the pressure of his unwavering and cold gaze, waving her hand while insisting the young girl simply desires to meet her father, receiving a silent and judgmental look as the king refuses to acknowledge her, narrowing his eyes in frustration when the conversation refuses to move on, signaling to the woman that her psychological games are having no effect on him, changing her tactic to mention the mysterious chef who arrived from the earth, proposing they treat the man as a high criminal for his culinary transgressions, causing Gazan to dismiss her with a sharp and final wave of his hand, walking away through the garden while a bird flies over the distant mountains, displaying a dark and confident grin as she holds a freshly plucked rose, while an attendant with a thick mustache watches her departure with extreme caution, shifting the focus toward the tall stone towers of the massive royal palace, where Ryuji listens as the woman relays the news of the king's refusal, leaving Tina to clasp her hands together in a moment of quiet dejection, letting the sun shine over the castle towers as the day slowly passes. Allowing Ryuji to rest on a lounge chair before the princess finds him, looking at him with a curious expression as she softly calls out his name. Ryuji and the princess sit under the stars while discussing their inability to meet the king, looking downward as she reflects on the weight of her current situation, declaring with a wide-eyed expression that she wants the young girl to keep smiling, while Ryuji takes a silent sip from his glass of ice water to mask his thoughts, imagining a girl's radiant smile while speaking about the joy of being well-fed. As the crescent moon shines brightly above the thin layers of evening clouds, setting his drink down firmly while the princess stands by with an inquisitive look, breaking into a wide and determined grin as he claims to have a great idea, shifting the focus to a young boy with a bowl cut wandering through town, clutching his growling stomach as he watches a couple enjoy a fancy dinner, turning around in surprise when a person's boot steps into his field of vision, flashing toward an intense battle where energy blasts tear across a fractured landscape, showing a masked warrior straining under the pressure of a self-destructing spirit blade, while a massive orb of magical energy threatens to wipe out an entire district, returning to the town where a girl in commoner's garb stands with a pleasant expression, leaning in to address the young boy who looks up at her with uncertainty, leading him away through the stone corridor while looking back to ensure he follows, approaching Ryuji's stall while he holds a newspaper and looks up at his guests, slamming the paper down on the wooden table to emphasize his sudden reaction, ending with a girl wielding a massive sword as she charges forward into the fray. Multiple afterimages of the warrior girl strike rapidly at a massive sphere of energy, while Ryuji declares himself the master chef with a confident and boisterous grin, turning his focus back to the prep station to rhythmically slice fresh vegetables. As the young boy watches in amazement while Ryuji skillfully drains the steaming noodles, shifting back to the battlefield where the armored girl looks on with wide-eyed shock, as the enemy laughs maniacally while standing amidst a flurry of magical energy, showing an intense close-up of a strained face as they grit their teeth in fury. But the mood shifts as Ryuji presents his finished bowl of supreme ramen, causing the boy's eyes to sparkle with pure wonder at the sight of the food, while he stares in disbelief at the delicious meal resting right before him, explaining with a worried expression that he doesn't have the status or money for this, returning to the fray where the warrior girl lets out a fierce cry of determination, swinging her heavy blade through the air to generate a powerful shockwave, and pushing forward with all her might as the impact of her strike echoes. Back at the stall, Ryuji gives a reassuring thumbs up to ease the boy's concerns, providing an overhead view of the small food stand tucked beside a grand mansion, while the girl in commoner's clothes encourages the hesitant child to finally eat, leading him to pick up his chopsticks and prepare for his first bite, as he takes a large and satisfying slurp of the savory ramen noodles, while the warrior girl continues her relentless charge through the heat of battle. The warrior girl lets out a primal roar while lunging forward with her massive sword, as the boy finishes a large mouthful of noodles with a look of pure bliss, expressing his deep gratitude to the chef for the most delicious meal of his life. Before Ryuji claps his hands together to loudly summon more hungry patrons to his stand, shifting focus to the battlefield where a massive dome of destructive energy suddenly erupts, leaving the armored knight to grit her teeth in frustration as the enemy remains unscathed, while her companion looks on with a mixture of fear and growing desperation, plunging back into the fray with a desperate aerial strike against the overwhelming foe. But the scene cuts to an angry noblewoman storming toward the food stall, forcibly dragging Ryuji away from his station despite his vocal protests in confusion, bringing the group inside the mansion for a stern lecture regarding their unlicensed business. As she continues to rant about the illegality of serving food without permission, causing the girl with glasses to adjust her frames while Ryuji remains unbothered. Meanwhile, the villainous enemy on the battlefield surges with a terrifying aura of malice, returning to the mansion where a lengthy explanation of kingdom laws is delivered, leading the noblewoman to clutch her head in total exasperation at Ryuji's attitude, who simply smiles and explains his bold plan to have the king himself visit. While back in combat, the enemy's face contorts into a mask of pure murderous rage, screaming at the top of his lungs while lashing out with uncontrollable power. As the noblewoman stares at Ryuji in disbelief over his absurdly confident goals, Ryuji continues his bold explanation, while Tina smiles warmly in the background, though her maid remains completely hidden under a thick duvet on the bed. as the perspective shifts to ground level behind a mysterious man's sturdy legs. While the red-haired enemy on the battlefield roars amidst a swirling vortex of energy, cutting back to the mansion where a tall, mustachioed head chef stands with authority, prompting Ryuji to look over his shoulder with a casual, questioning expression before he points upward and asks the veteran chef about the king's culinary preferences, causing the older man's eyes to narrow as he processes this audacious request. While the three figures stand in the long hallway during a moment of silence, shifting back to the war where a titanic sphere of destructive magic consumes the land, as the warrior women exchange frantic shouts to coordinate their next desperate move, leading the masked fighter to grit her teeth with a look of absolute resolve. While back at the estate, a pair of eyes watch the maid shivering under her blankets, until a door creaks open slowly into the quiet, dimly lit corridor, where a young woman peeks through the gap with a look of stunned disbelief, observing the tall chef as he questions Ryuji's true intentions for the kingdom's cuisine, sparking Ryuji to fire back a passionate reply about the state of world food, just as a strange, spindly silhouette begins to glow with an ethereal white light, erupting into a colossal pillar of magical energy that tears through the battlefield. While the master chef watches Ryuji with a silent, calculating gaze, the master chef reveals a shocking truth, claiming he was the one who established the food laws, leaving Ryuji completely stunned as he yells back in a fit of disbelief, while a vision of the king making a contract with the dragon flashes through the conversation, shifting back to the battlefield where the masked warrior stands amidst a torrent of dark energy. As a monstrous force lunges forward through the thick smoke and debris, forcing the warrior to brace herself against the overwhelming magical pressure. Meanwhile, in a memory, a younger chef wakes up disoriented in a quiet forest clearing, until a powerful figure looms over him and asks if he is the chef from another world. As the man introduces himself as Gazan and requests aid to save the realm, cutting to a lonely banquet where the king sits before a mountain of empty plates, while the head chef approaches him slowly with a special dessert cart, presenting an elegant glass bowl filled with sweets and delicate white flowers, which triggers a deep memory for the king as he gazes at the petals, leading him to recall a time he walked through the city streets in a heavy cloak, passing by a vibrant garden where the same white flowers were blooming in abundance, eventually stopping at a humble flower stall to examine the blossoms up close, only to be greeted by a shopkeeper who asks if the flowers are to his liking, prompting him to quickly hide his face and claim he has no interest in such things, though the woman simply smiles warmly and continues to offer her kind words, leaving the hidden king stunned when she remarks on the gentleness of his eyes. The shopkeeper leans in closer to the cloaked king, asking if he has heard the local rumors, and whispers into his ear that even King Gazan is said to love these specific flowers, showing a gaze full of sincerity and warmth as she shares the secret, which causes the hidden king to break out in a cold sweat from the unexpected mention, his eyes widening in total shock as he realizes how much the public notices, prompting him to question her about why such a cold-blooded ruler would care for blossoms, while she explains that these humble flowers bring light and peace to anyone who keeps them, maintaining her cheerful expression as she speaks of the comfort they provide to the weary, leaving the king speechless as he stares back at her with a conflicted expression, until she notices a small change in his face and playfully points out that he finally smiled, causing him to look down and mutter a quiet acknowledgement of her perspective, before he suddenly declares his intention to buy every single flower she has on display, returning to the present where the king gazes mournfully at a petal while whispering a name, as the head chef stands by quietly after finishing his service at the banquet table, suggesting with a sly grin that the king should venture out into the city in disguise once more. But the monarch closes his eyes and dismisses the idea with a tired sigh, leading the chef to insist that there is one particular location His Majesty needs to witness, shifting the focus to Ryuji's lively outdoor eatery, where commoners gather to enjoy incredible meals, where the young chef works with intense focus while tossing a large pan over the heat, shouting out instructions for the next order as Shiori rushes to serve the hungry crowd. Ryuji calls out an order for table 8, and Shiori salutes while carrying a plate. She and another worker present the steaming dishes to the customers with bright, welcoming smiles. A man's eyes bulge in shock as he is served a plate of premium ginger pork. Another customer adjusts his monocle in disbelief at the sight of the perfectly cooked mackerel miso stew. Both men shout in pure culinary ecstasy after taking their first delicious bites of the food. A detailed list outlines the required ingredients for recreating this premium ginger pork dish, Starting the process, half the ginger is sliced into thin strips while the rest is grated. Subsequently, the pork loin is seasoned with salt and pepper before being coated in flour. Heating salad oil in a large frying pan follows over a medium-high flame. Placing the meat into the pan piece by piece allows it to sear until brown. Carefully wiping away excess oil with kitchen paper ensures the sauce adheres properly later. Reducing the heat once the meat is browned permits the addition of various seasonings. Tossing in the shredded and grated ginger completes the simmering sauce in the pan. Plating the finished ginger pork over a bed of shredded cabbage finishes the presentation. Switching to the mackerel recipe, the ginger is sliced and the fish receives crosswise cuts. Lightly dusting both sides of the mackerel with potato starch provides a perfect coating. Pan-frying the fish in oil requires wiping away any rendered fat to maintain flavor. Pouring in a mixture of water, sake, and miso adds depth to the cooking liquid. Bringing the liquid to a boil allows it to simmer uncovered for exactly 6 minutes. Stirring in a final teaspoon of miso completes the rich and savory mackerel stew. A hooded man watches in disbelief as commoners and nobles dine alongside one another. His eyes narrow as he questions the lack of separation between the social classes. Suddenly, a worker approaches the visiting officials and offers a polite welcome to the establishment. Shiori stands frozen in shock as she recognizes the stern man standing before her. The official accuses those present of some form of deception while turning his back. He immediately commands his companion to depart from the lively outdoor restaurant. Desperate to stop him, Shiori shouts for him to wait with a voice full of emotion. She reveals that her mother's final wish was for her to find him in the capital. Her head drops as she struggles to hold back tears while speaking of her past. The weight of her words lingers in the air as she looks down in silence. Above them, a solitary bird flies across the sky while the man remains deep in thought. Surprisingly, the hooded man changes his mind and demands to be shown to a table. Ryuji steps forward with a polite bow and welcomes the royal guest to enjoy his food. The man scoffs at the claim of supreme cuisine while maintaining a harsh and skeptical gaze. Back in the kitchen, the staff wonder if the guest even possesses a sense of taste. Ryuji grabs a knife and calls out to Shiori to take her place at the station. He hands over the responsibility to her and declares that it is finally her turn. With a look of intense focus, Shiori begins dicing the ingredients on her cutting board. A worried coworker asks if it is truly wise to let her cook for such a guest. Ryuji remains firm, stating that this particular dish must be prepared by her hands alone. Sizzling sounds fill the air. As Shiori sautés the ingredients to cook off the ketchup's acidity, she maintains a steady rhythm while tossing the pan to ensure the chicken rice is evenly coated. Shifting her focus, she prepares the eggs by stirring them over a gentle water bath. Though her nerves threaten to take over, Ryuji reassures her that everything will be fine. With a delicate touch, she allows the semi-liquid egg to flow smoothly over the rice. The kitchen staff looks on as she completes the dish with a final, satisfied exclamation. Before them lies a glistening omuris that represents the peak of her culinary training. This specific preparation is highlighted as the absolute best version of the classic meal. The process starts with meticulously chopping chicken thighs, mushrooms, and onions into precise sizes. Butter melts in the pan as the seasoned chicken and onions are fried until aromatic. Mushrooms join the mix, followed by ketchup and rice to create a hearty foundation. Fresh eggs are beaten with a pinch of salt until the texture is completely smooth. The mixture is poured into a warmed pot where butter has already begun to foam. Constant movement with a spatula transforms the liquid into a soft and creamy scramble. Meanwhile, the rice is pressed into a mold to create a perfect dome on the plate. The eggs are layered on top along with a savory blend of ketchup and sauce. Shiori carefully places the steaming plate before the intimidating guest who waits in silence. The man stares intensely at the food while his sharp eyes search for any imperfection. He asks with a cold voice why she chose to serve this specific dish today. Both chefs look on in anticipation as they wait for the official to try the meal. Shiori explains her intuition to Kashigi, who watches her with a look of surprise. She remains confident in her choice as her gaze softens with memory. Gesturing animatedly, she insists that her feelings about the dish are correct. The contrast between her warmth and the guest's cold stare becomes apparent. Suddenly, she remembers a crucial finishing touch that she almost overlooked. She picks up a ketchup bottle and carefully draws a design over the egg. A beautiful 5-petaled flower shape now rests atop the golden omelet. Presenting the meal, she identifies the design as her mother's favorite lumina flower. The guest lifts a spoonful of the dish to examine it closely. Without hesitation, he takes the first bite while everyone watches in silence. A quiet stillness falls over the room as the two figures remain motionless. The man seems to experience a sudden surge of emotion that leaves him speechless. Another spoonful reveals the fluffy texture of the rice hidden beneath the egg. The image of the lumina flower blooms in his mind like a vivid memory. His face softens as a sense of deep peace washes over his features. Kashigi asks how this is possible if the guest has no sense of taste. Ruji speaks up, explaining the connection between a parent and a child's cooking. The glistening rice and sauce represent more than just a simple meal. The guest looks down at the plate with a newfound sense of respect. The observers agree that a daughter's cooking possesses a power no other chef can match. Shiori gazes up with wide eyes, asking her father if the food is delicious. The man closes his eyes and confirms the flavor, reminiscing about their old family table. Transitionally, the scene shifts to a celebratory toast as wine glasses clink together. Shiori reacts with flustered modesty while her companions praise her new status as a princess. From a high angle, the group is seen relaxing and drinking in the bustling kitchen. Ruji helps himself to another bottle of liquor, much to Shiori's vocal disapproval. Kashigi grovels on the floor, begging for forgiveness for his past insults against the princess. Without warning, the tall chef with the flamboyant mustache makes a sudden appearance. Ruji jumps back in surprise, demanding to know how the chef entered so easily. The newcomer ignores the outburst and thrusts a folded newspaper toward the group. The headline boldly features Shiori, describing her incredible rise from servant to princess. Crowding around the paper, the group marvels at the overwhelming public interest in her. Ruji begins daydreaming about the vast fortune they could make from character merchandise. Turning to a more serious matter, Shiori inquires about the fate of the food laws. The chef explains that the king is actively working to abolish the outdated regulations. He emphasizes that it was Shiori's cooking that truly moved the monarch's heart. With a look of victory, he confirms that the restrictive laws are finally being repealed. Shiori beams with joy, humbly crediting the success to everyone's combined efforts. A sense of deep satisfaction washes over Ryuji and his companions as they stand together. Looking toward the future, Ryuji celebrates a world where everyone can enjoy delicious meals. The king explains the difficulty of creating a world where everyone has the means to cook freely. Closing his eyes, he accepts full responsibility for the food laws he once imposed on the kingdom. Shiori gazes at him in wide-eyed shock as he pledges his life to serving the common people. Ryuji notices her distracted state and asks her what her father said to her earlier. A memory surfaces of the king sitting on his throne while lamenting a past village attack. The scene shifts to the king arriving at the ruins of the village alongside his soldiers. Against a bleak sky, the silhouettes of grieving survivors stand amidst the wreckage of their lives. He pulls a young Shiori into a desperate embrace, apologizing for being too late to protect her. Shiori weeps as she holds on to him, finally bridging the long distance between them. Back in the present, the king tells her that how she chooses to live is now entirely up to her. He maintains a sharp, intense gaze while reminding her that royal power belongs to the people. Shiori's eye reflects the immense weight of the duty her father has just placed upon her shoulders. She discusses the difficulty of her new royal position with her companions in the quiet kitchen. Ryuji observes her thoughtfully as he takes a long sip from his glass. The day continues over the city as clouds drift slowly past the tall stone buildings. Leaning over a table by a single candle, Shiori loses herself in deep thought about her future. She attempts to clear her mind by washing a pile of dirty dishes at the kitchen sink. Passers-by on the street whisper and point as they recognize the princess in her maid uniform. Overwhelmed by the sudden expectations of her rank, Shiori clutches her head and screams in frustration. She eventually asks Ryuji for guidance, seeking an answer to the difficult question of what she should do. Ryuji takes a sip of his drink and bluntly admits he has no experience being royalty. He pauses for a moment before offering his own perspective on her current predicament. Leaning in, he suggests she reflect on what actions of hers have brought joy to others. Shiori looks down in silence as his words begin to resonate with her inner conflict. The concept of making people happy lingers in her mind as she searches for a memory. Suddenly, a companion approaches and presents her with a letter that has just arrived. Shiori accepts the envelope with a startled expression, questioning who would send her mail now. She holds the letter close, her curiosity piqued as she prepares to open it. Her eyes widen with realization as she reads the contents of the unexpected message. Inside is a group photo of smiling children and an elderly woman celebrating Princess Tina. Ryuji chuckles about the old woman still being alive while Shiori scolds him for being rude. The sight of a young girl's radiant laughter in the photo fills the room with warmth. Shiori gazes at the image, noting how healthy and vibrant the child appears to be. She experiences a sudden moment of clarity as the true purpose of her role becomes clear. Later, she stands before the king on his throne as he asks if she has an answer. Surrounded by her trusted friends, Shiori stands tall and prepared to deliver her final decision. She recounts her experience of visiting an orphanage shortly after she first left the mansion. Shiori describes a young girl there who was too traumatized to speak after losing her parents. She explains how she prepared a simple hamburger for the silent, suffering child. The memory of the girl finally breaking into a joyful laugh provides the answer she sought. Shiori loudly proclaims her desire to become a culinary researcher instead of just a chef. The king stares in confusion, repeating the term as if trying to understand its meaning. Noticing the king's bewilderment, the head chef nudges Ryuji to provide a clear explanation. Ryuji defines a chef's job as serving a perfect dish to a customer's face. He explains that a culinary researcher focuses on helping everyone cook delicious meals for themselves. The ultimate goal, he adds, is to bring a smile to every person across the globe. Shiori declares her intent to travel as a princess and share the joy of cooking. The king warns her that the journey will be difficult due to widespread resentment towards royalty. Undeterred by the potential danger, Shiori looks forward with confidence in the power of food. Taking a moment to process her words, the king closes his eyes in deep thought. He grants his royal permission, prompting Shiori to let out a cry of pure excitement. Ryuji looks at his phone while considering the many new recipes he must still create. Unexpectedly, the smartphone begins to buzz loudly as an incoming call from his staff appears. Ryuji stands frozen in shock, questioning how his modern device could possibly receive a signal. The faces of his former colleagues appear on the screen, shouting that they finally connected. He offers a sheepish apology, explaining that he has been away in another world entirely. His friends demand his immediate return, ignoring his bizarre excuse as Shiori watches from behind. A frantic colleague screams into the phone that they cannot upload videos without him. They warn that subscribers are leaving and their entire company is on the brink of ruin. Ryuji promises to talk later and prepares to hang up after hearing their desperate pleas.